Web novels and web novel audiobooks are not the same. If you simply copy and paste a web novel into an audiobook format, the final result will provide a poor listening experience. That's why I carefully revise every single chapter in this novel to ensure an enjoyable and immersive experience for you. I go through multiple rounds of rewriting and listening to make sure the narration flows naturally, almost as if you were reading it out loud yourself. This is not just a direct copy of the original novel. However, I do acknowledge that I adapted this novel for commercial purposes, so most chapters are paid content. I hope you understand that this does not violate copyright policies. The reason I do all of this is simple: I'm just a big fan. As many of you know, I love listening to web novel audiobooks, and this is one of my personal favorites. The audio speed is set to 3, but if that feels too fast, let me know. If there's a novel you'd like me to turn into an audiobook, feel free to suggest it, and I'll do my best to make it happen. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1. Nice to meet you. Amazing Lord Kusagakure. I can only accompany you this far. In front of the Shino Academy, a young woman dressed in a white kimono and scarlet hakama was bidding farewell to a reluctant young man. From here on, you'll have to walk your own path. The young woman's smile was radiant, seemingly looking forward to the days ahead. Well, now, those words are quite heartless. The young man scoffed. After all, I am your head priest. Yes, head priest. Nanao eyes coaxed gently. During your time at the academy, please, pretty please, don't cause any trouble. There are many students from upper-class noble families, even from the 5 great noble houses. If you were to offend them, given our status, we might quickly find ourselves on the execution grounds. For once, the young man didn't contradict the young woman. Instead, he nodded lightly and replied with a smile, I understand, Nanao. This reaction momentarily stunned her, but she soon smiled, waved goodbye, and left the vicinity of the academy. Today was entrance day for Shino Academy, and many young men like him were present, including some dressed in luxurious noble attire. This is the Soul Society, the world of the Shinigami. His name is Akira Kusagakure, the head priest of the Sakaon Shrine in the Rakongai district, also known as the Kanboshi. He couldn't quite remember how long it had been since he crossed over to this world. The initial period of struggle for food ended when he joined the shrine. Then, leveraging his understanding and familiarity with the role of a spiritual medium, he climbs step by step to the top of the shrine, becoming the head priest. Although the Sakaon Shrine consisted of only him and Nanao, this didn't diminish his status in Rakongai. As the sole head priest for several nearby districts, Akira wielded considerable authority. He personally handled rituals, exorcisms, and prayers, with Nanao as his assistant. However, in certain special situations, such as encounters with villains, rebels, unrest, or even hollows infiltrating Rakongai, she had to take the lead. Akira, after all, lacked systematic training and had no combat experience. Even with his innate talent, he couldn't translate it into sufficient fighting power. To address this vulnerability, Nanao, after careful deliberation, decided to send him to the academy for training. Though this might cause the Sakaon Shrine to lose some prestige, she prioritized the future of both the shrine and its head priest. Akira, however, harbored no grand ambitions, nor did he wish to enter the troublesome vortex of the Siriite AI. His sole desire was to protect his small domain. Admittedly, this desire seemed quite luxurious in such a dangerous world. Yet, he believed he still had a glimmer of hope. For a year ago, his cheat code had already arrived. Check-in system, as the name suggests, one only needs to check in to continuously grow stronger, requiring less effort compared to the self-discipline of traditional training. However, when Akira delved deeper into understanding this cheat code, he discovered it was a complete disappointment. Daily, monthly, and yearly check-ins, the current 3 types of check-ins could only be described as progressively worse. On the first day of check-in, he received a high-quality broom that swept the floor smoothly, clean and efficient. The second day's reward was 2 stone lanterns, perfect for placing at the shrine's entrance, emphasizing upright illumination. The third day's check-in reward was a set of high-quality Maiko attire, which he gave to Nanao, significantly increasing the young woman's favor. This one was marginally useful. After that, the check-in rewards were mostly miscellaneous junk. Occasionally, he would encounter items that could improve his life, but useful items were few and far between. These included, but weren't limited to, Genri Uzai's secret recipe for baked sweet potatoes, high-quality Kanpi Ito, sweet dried persimmons, and bound volumes of Siriite AI communication. This situation persisted until the first monthly check-in. First monthly check-in successful, obtained exclusive trait, Rishi Affinity. Rishi sees you as a friend, highly compatible with you, doubling your spiritual power, training speed. Benefiting from this new trait, Akira began to train in earnest. Although he still lagged behind the true prodigies, he stood out among ordinary civilians. Through his diligent efforts and the continuous rewards from check-ins, Akira's status panel had reached a relatively luxurious level by the eve of his academy entrance. Name: Akira Kisaragi. Identity: Sikaon Shrine Head Priest, Rakongai Commoner, Shino Academy First-Year Student. Spiritual Pressure, Level 10, Sword Art, Level 10, Hand-to-Hand Combats, Level 10, Flash Steps, Level 10, Kido, Level 10, Exclusive Trait, Rishi Affinity. This simple yet comprehensive status panel clearly indicated his current strength. Based on his calculations and deductions, Akira's current power level was equivalent to that of a standard Shinigami in any division of the 13 Division of Imperial Guards. Despite the passage of time blurring his memory of the Bleach world's details, he knew that a squad member level existence barely qualified as cannon fodder. Moreover, his current strength might not even match Nano's. Nevertheless, this level was more than sufficient to secure his entry into the academy, and even land him a spot in the elite class. One could only attribute this success to his Rishi Affinity trait. As Nano's silhouette faded into the distance, Akira set aside his jumbled thoughts and fixed his gaze upon the academy's grand and imposing entrance. Location check-in, Shino Academy. Obtained exclusive trait, Danger Instinct. Danger Instinct: you have an innate, extraordinary sensitivity to danger, especially when facing life-threatening crises. The sudden acquisition of this trait caused his senses to heighten dramatically, sharpening his perception of the world around him. Lurking dangers made his hair stand on end, and his entire being tensed. His weakness made him acutely aware of potential threats, as if the world itself harbored malice towards him. A gentle voice broke through his unease from behind. "Excuse me, are you also a new student at the academy?" Akira turned to see a young man wearing the same blue and white academy uniform. The stranger had a warm, sunshine-like smile, short brown hair with a slight curl, brown eyes, and a somewhat thin frame that gave an impression of frailty. "Yes, I'm Akira Kisaragi." Upon hearing his introduction, the gentle and refined young man's lips curved slightly upward as he spoke softly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Sosuke Aizen." Chapter 2. His scalp tingled as a vague sensation of explosion burst between his temples. The name Sosuke Aizen undoubtedly shocked Akira, leaving him momentarily dazed. He never imagined he'd arrive at an unknown point in the Bleach world, instantly rendering his supposed foreknowledge half useless. He had originally planned to avoid Aizen and lay low, but unexpectedly, right after leaving the starting area, he ran head-on into the big boss. "Kisaragi-kun, you seem to be a bit..." "No, I'm fine." Akira snapped back to his senses, shaking his head vigorously and regaining his composure. He looked towards Aizen, just in time to meet the other's slightly concerned gaze. Strangely, his danger instinct didn't detect even the slightest threat. In fact, his gentle and modest smile gave off a sense of warmth, involuntarily making one feel fond of the young man. Perhaps this was what they called personal charisma? "That's good then." Aizen smiled. "The reporting time is almost over, we should hurry up." Akira nodded, suppressing the information about Aizen in his heart, and entered the Shino Academy alongside him. First year, Class 1. After completing the relevant procedures, Akira and Aizen sat in the neat classroom, curiously surveying their equally inquisitive classmates. The students occupying this room were all geniuses who had excelled in the entrance exams. Akira humbly attributed his placement in Class 1 to sheer luck, maintaining a modest demeanor. Beside him sat Aizen, a true genius in every sense of the word. "Akira, you've stared at me 37 times already," Aizen remarked without turning his head. Their brief exchanges had fostered a growing familiarity, evident in the subtle shift in how they addressed each other. This was largely due to his infectiously charismatic personality. It was precisely this charisma that piqued Akira's curiosity. Was Aizen's current persona genuine, or merely a facade? "I'm pondering a question." Akira mused. "Would you rather fight a duck the size of a horse, or 100 horses the size of ducks?" Aizen's gaze froze. Before he could respond, Akira's attention shifted to a figure steadily approaching the podium. "Is this our future teacher?" His adaptable nature allowed him to quickly accept his unexpected status as Aizen's classmate. There was no escaping now, he could only embrace the reality calmly. "I am your homeroom teacher, Oikaru." The middle-aged man, his face devoid of any smile, launched into the customary start-of-term speech. His endless stream of words seemed to flow with an ease that appeared to be an innate ability of every teacher. "I hope that in the future, you will not only be able to join any division of the 13 Division of Imperial Guards but also, through training, continuously advance towards the center of power." The podium droned on, while the students below whispered among themselves. "Sosuke, is your goal also to become a member of the 13 Division of Imperial Guards?" Akira asked curiously, "or do you have an even loftier ambition?" The current young man beside him was quite different from the psycho, controller, cynic, egotist in his impression. Aizen turned slightly, appearing thoughtful. After a moment's pondering, he answered quietly, I think all students who join Shino Academy probably have similar ideals, don't you? After all, the purpose of the academy is to cultivate new blood for the Kido Corps, the Onmitsu Kido, and the 13 Division of Imperial Guards. Akira leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head with a grin. Nah, I'm not that ambitious. I'm all about taking it easy. My grand aspiration? Simply making it to graduation with my sanity intact. Aizen nodded slightly, his expression calm. To each their own. Ideals are merely what one most wants to achieve at the current stage. People always change to different degrees as time passes. Perhaps, in the near future. Just as he was pondering, he noticed Akira's expression suddenly turn serious. Not today. As soon as the words left his mouth, a whooshing sound came from the direction of the podium. Akira tilted his head slightly, a piece of chalk grazing past his cheek and hitting the forehead of the student behind him. The exaggerated force left a white mark right between the other student's eyebrows. Smack. A crisp collision sound rang out. Damn, look at that bald eagle picking on me. Akira sneered disdainfully, extremely satisfied with his danger instinct ability. I know I'm handsome, but I don't like this much attention. While conversing, he had clearly sensed the impending danger. Instinctively tilting his head allowed him to avoid the crisis. Aizen shook his head with a wry smile, gaining a deeper understanding of his newly made friend. Though seemingly weak, Akira always displayed some peculiar qualities. He also had noticed the teacher's earlier movement but hadn't expected this guy to dodge it so effortlessly. This inevitably piqued his curiosity about his recently met companion. Akira Kisaragi, Sosuke Aizen. Uruoi called out. He was somewhat surprised that a new student could evade his sneak attack but didn't dwell on it. Maintaining classroom discipline, he continued, please remain quiet. Let's return to our previous topic. He chose not to focus on Akira's rule violation. In his view, a teacher should possess a certain level of tolerance, otherwise, rebellious students would inevitably cause his blood pressure to skyrocket. However, he had underestimated someone's lack of boundaries. Before long, this naive teacher would realize the extent of his mistake. The first day of school focused primarily on academy rules, teaching objectives, and motivational speeches about diligent training, rather than substantial learning content. As a modern-day slacker, Akira viewed these words as mere nonsense. Naturally, he wouldn't voice his disagreement openly. In his mind, the most crucial task now was to uncover his cheat abilities and master more powerful skills as quickly as possible to achieve his newly set grand ideal. His recent success in meeting the check-in conditions at Shino Academy and receiving rewards had sparked numerous ideas. He wondered if location check-ins, in addition to daily check-ins, might accelerate his path to strength. However, it seemed ordinary locations weren't enough to meet these check-in conditions. This realization led Akira to ponder what special locations existed in the Soul Society. Sosuke, are you familiar with the Soul Society? Somewhat. Aizen replied, an extremely modest answer, befitting his current personality. Having racked his brains to no avail, Akira decided to pose the question directly, are there any important buildings in the Soul Society similar to Shino Academy? As the future mastermind and a true all-around genius, such a small question shouldn't pose a challenge for Aizen. Many. Aizen replied, there's the 13 Division of Imperial Guards Headquarters, Kido Corps Headquarters, Central Underground Assembly Hall, Central Great Underground Prison, Senzaku, Palace of Penitence, Central Execution Ground, Sokioka Hill, Noble Family Mansions, and more. Their importance even surpasses that of Shino Academy. I see. Akira's disappointment was palpable. As a mere academy student, he had no access to these places, rendering check-ins impossible. He'd have to resort to grinding daily check-ins instead. He hoped for better luck in the future. After all, surely one's luck can't remain bad forever, right? Chapter 3 Academy Life allowed Akira to recapture a bit of his past. In his spare time, he used his expertise as a shrine priest to exorcise demons for young, beautiful girls in the name of chivalry, promoting the Sakaon Shrine. The pure friendships of student days were often the most touching. Ah, what a wonderful time. Of course, there were drawbacks. After growing accustomed to sleeping until he waked up naturally at the Sakaon Shrine, Akira suddenly found himself unable to adjust his biological clock. Every morning at 7, when the bell rang, he was plunged into a state of confusion. Back to the daily grind, swapping freedom for boring lectures, saying goodbye to lazy mornings. Man, school life's a drag. Countless similar phrases surged through his mind as Aizen, already washed and dressed, knocked on his door to walk to class together. Is this what life is? Akira groaned weakly, like a wounded beast, struggling to get up from bed and barely managing to don the blue and white academy uniform. When he opened the door, Aizen's familiar gentle smile greeted him. Though unsure why, Akira realized this guy clearly intended to stick close, following him around since enrollment. The plan to lay low and develop quietly was thus declared a failure. Fortunately, his words and actions weren't detestable. Rather, the gentle young man seemed most suitable for the role of a friend. "You'd better tidy up your appearance," Aizen kindly reminded Akira on their way to the classroom. Since befriending this priest, he had gained deeper insight into human nature. He discovered that the boundaries of acceptable behavior could be surprisingly flexible without causing offense. Was this an innate talent? This morning's class is with Teacher Omida. He's particularly strict about proper attire. Having attended classes for some time now, Aizen had grasped the teacher's personalities and preferences, always advising his careless companion accordingly. Akira nodded listlessly, appearing utterly exhausted. Omida, will have to endure his boasting about his family background again. It's despicable. These nobles leech off the common folk in Rakongai, yet they live so comfortably. Aizen glanced sideways and mused, "Akira, do you harbor such strong resentment towards the nobility?" "No, I resent not being one of them," Akira replied, casually draping his arm over Aizen's shoulder with a grin. After all, the dragon slayer often becomes the dragon. Aizen seemed lost in thought. In the classroom, Marikyo Omida stood on the podium, his muscular build and stern expression commanding attention. He surveyed each entering student with a fierce gaze. Unlike his obese appearance after retirement, the current Marikyo was an elite among elites, despite his penchant for flaunting family wealth. He excelled in all aspects: sword art, hand-to-hand combats, flash steps, and Kido. His hand-to-hand combats, hand-to-hand, skills were particularly outstanding, earning him a position as the hand-to-hand combats instructor at the Shino Academy in his spare time. Once all students had arrived, Marikyo lowered his hands, his expression growing even more solemn. "Before we begin the class, let me explain something. As entrance exam elites, you've all made remarkable progress. After this class, specialized personnel will assess your hand-to-hand combats level. Now, let's begin." Without allowing questions, he launched into his hand-to-hand combats lecture. Akira paid close attention. After all, this concerned his future. Given his recent streak of disappointing check-in rewards, he knew he had to become self-reliant. Aizen, usually the most attentive listener, seemed uncharacteristically distracted. It wasn't until Akira waved a hand in front of his eyes that he snapped back to reality, his expression peculiar. "Thank you, Akira." Akira raised an eyebrow quizzically. Aizen smiled and explained, "I've just had a revelation." At that moment, a familiar voice resonated in Akira's mind. Sosuke Aizen's trust level has reached the threshold. Check-in condition achieved, character check-in, Sosuke Aizen, obtained 1000 EXP in spiritual pressure level increased. Currently at level 20, obtained exclusive trait, Heart of a God, supreme arrogance, viewing oneself as a true god. Talent for learning anything is raised to the max of the current realm. Akira inhaled sharply, his expression morphing from shock to bewilderment, then to unbridled joy, all within a fraction of a second. This rapid transformation was so remarkable that even Aizen was startled. He had initially believed location check-ins were unbeatable, but this new development proved even more potent. It was an unexpected and thrilling surprise. Since befriending Aizen, Akira had often felt inferior due to his perceived lack of genius. Now, it seemed, those days were over, his newfound talent would surpass even the controlling boy's abilities. The acquisition of the Heart of a God instantly heightened his senses to extraordinary levels, transforming his perception of the world. He realized that the world through a genius's eyes was vastly different from that of an ordinary person. As Akira reveled in this exhilarating revelation, Marikyo's lecture drew to a close. That concludes today's class. Next up is your assessment. His hawk-like gaze swept across the room. Overwhelmed by his aura, the students held their breath, some even lowering their heads to avoid eye contact. However, when he spotted Akira lost in his own world, his brows furrowed. Marikyo had an impression of this shrine priest from the Sukaon shrine. Decent talent, above average for a first year, but with an unstable personality, a troublemaker who often violated rules and discipline. He'd talked back to teachers, exorcised demons for female classmates under the guise of chivalry, and openly advertised for the Sukaon shrine. Marikyo's gaze intensified. He hoped this kid wouldn't cause trouble in the upcoming test, otherwise, he'd make Akira understand the true meaning of resolve. Just then, a dark shadow approached from outside. The window shattered with a crisp sound, scattering countless glass shards across the podium. A hearty, arrogant laugh followed. "Ha ha, are you ready to face your miserable fate, newbies?" On the podium stood a dark-skinned girl with her purple short hair. She crossed her arms and grinned, her clean white teeth gleaming in the sunlight. Next, I, Yaruichi Shioin, will be your hand-to-hand combats examiner. Chapter 4. The young woman on stage exuded youthful beauty, captivating the young man in the audience. In Akira's mind, Yaruichi had always been a sexy, mature woman. Yet, after her self-introduction, he felt transported to a different reality. Despite this, her behavior revealed a cheerful personality with an unmatched talent for mischief and teasing. Yaruichi Shioin? Could she be from the Shioin family? A student exclaimed in surprise. Many noble-born students recognize the weight of the Shioin name, one of the true upper echelons of the Soul Society, a supreme power that towered above countless nobles. One of the 4 great noble houses, the Shioin family. Aizen's enigmatic gaze betrayed a fading smile. As his attention shifted to Akira beside him, his expression froze. The young man sat upright, eyes fixed ahead, the picture of propriety. He might have passed for a model student, if one failed to notice where his gaze truly fell. "What are you looking at?" Aizen asked in a low, curious voice. Akira glanced sideways, a smirk playing on his lips. "Hey, what a question. I'm appreciating the most beautiful sight in the world, of course." Aizen's expression stiffened, and he dropped the subject. He realized, not for the first time, that he and his friend often operated on different wavelengths. While others reeled from the revelation of Yoruichi's identity, Akira had already begun admiring her physique. It was a behavior difficult to categorize. On stage, Yoruichi's gaze swept the room. As the Shioin family's heir apparent, her exceptional abilities were evident. She immediately detected the bold stare from the handsome young man from the back of the class. In response, the corner of the dark-skinned woman's mouth curled up, her delicate fang glinting dangerously in the sunlight. "Let's start from my left side." Akira glanced around, suddenly realizing that if they proceeded in order, he and Aizen would be last. The assessment officially began. Yoruichi wore a black bodysuit that accentuated her beautiful, slightly curved figure. Still in her teenage years, she hadn't yet developed the captivating charm she would possess a century later. Even so, her presence was mesmerizing. However, due to her status, the students engaging in hand-to-hand combat with her didn't dare raise their heads, fearing Marikyo might catch them and send them to the Sokioka Hill execution grounds. "Are you ready?" "Why yes, I'm ready," a frail male student replied, his legs trembling slightly. Yoruichi let out a light laugh. Her figure suddenly appeared before the male student like a ghost, her slender fingers gently stroking like plucking guitar strings, pressing against his completely unguarded chest. The seemingly harmless move suddenly burst forth with astonishing impact. The contact of flesh, a pure release of force, resonated thunderously. Boom. In an instant, the student's fair face turned bright red, as if all the blood in his body had rushed to his head. After a brief moment of resistance, his entire body became a human cannonball, flying backward and slamming hard against the classroom wall, sticking to it like a hanging picture. Knocking people out like hanging pictures, a decisive victory without suspense. Akira's eyes widened. Good grief. Was Yoruichi already this formidable at this age? Unsteady footwork, weak limbs. Yoruichi commented, not even the most basic sense of vigilance. Marikyo, the students you're teaching are getting worse and worse. Marikyo broke out in a cold sweat, managing only an embarrassed smile, not daring to refute at all. No one knew Yoruichi's current strength better than him. Even if one excluded the decisive factor of spiritual pressure, in terms of technique alone, he couldn't match her. The difference lay in talent. Next. Yoruichi was in high spirits, treating the assessment of weaker students as a form of entertainment. Given her personality, it seemed she was simply playing around. Following the example set by the first victim, students approached one after another, only to be swiftly defeated. Most were knocked down in a single hit, with only a handful of prodigies able to withstand a second strike. Of course, this was purely hand-to-hand combat's technique, without involving any spiritual pressure. After numerous students lay scattered across the classroom, her gaze finally fell on Aizen and Akira. Next one. Yoruichi grinned. Aizen's gaze flickered with hesitation before he calmly stepped forward. As before, she merely asked if he was ready. Once he nodded, she launched her attack. An unexpected event unfolded. Akira's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across them. The invincible Aizen had fallen. Just like the others before him, he was knocked out without suspense in a single hit. This undoubtedly reshapes Akira's understanding of this world. Others might not know, but he couldn't possibly be unaware. In terms of genius, few in the entire Soul Society could surpass Aizen, not even the 4 great noble houses. This point was absolutely indisputable. Yet, looking at the beaten boy lying on the ground, his breath weak, Seemingly on the verge of collapse, Akira found himself once again in a daze. Your acting is so good, does your family know? Another rookie. Yoruichi didn't give Aizen a second glance, instead turning her gaze to Akira. A dangerous aura immediately enveloped him. You're the last one. With a playful gaze like a cat toying with its prey, her slightly exposed fang glinted dangerously. She beckoned to him. Come on, young man, let me see your hand-to-hand combat skills. Akira forced out a reluctant smile. Although he prided himself on his talent being no less than others, he knew there was always a transition period to convert talent into actual strength. As he hesitated, Marikyo loudly urged, hurry up, Kisaragi. Don't think about using those underhanded methods to avoid the assessment. Akira calmed his mind and walked forward with a determined expression. It's just getting beaten up, right? It's not like he hasn't been beaten before. As long as he learned from Aizen, everything would be fine. He had already planned to take one hit and then just lie down. But, looking at the playful gaze of the dark-skinned woman in front of him, he suddenly felt a surge of alertness. His survival instinct exploded with a sharp warning. Damn it. This woman is getting serious. Akira's pupils contracted, his senses sharpened to the extreme, instinctively entering a battle state. Without asking, without any preparation, Yoruichi's slender fingers gently stroked like plucking guitar strings, then clenched into a fist. In the instant her light footstep moved forward. Boom. Her thin fist, accompanied by a piercing sound of air being cut, burst forth with a shockwave, heading straight for his face. Chapter 5. The surging energy erupted, transforming into a fierce hurricane. As if a bomb had exploded. Akira's vision darkened, his ears ringing from the impact. Even without using spiritual pressure, Yoruichi's pure combination of strength and technique was enough to achieve absolute dominance at this stage. Akira's heart sank as he instinctively dodged to the side, trying to avoid this fatal attack. No one understood her devastating punch better than him. A direct hit would result in severe injury at best, death at worst. This woman has gone mad. Her seemingly slender fist grazed past his cheek, its impact transforming into an explosive hurricane. He felt as if he were caught in the dark currents of the deep sea, his body pulled and stretched like putty, an unprecedented sensation. Danger lurked everywhere. The hurricane slammed into the solid ground with a boom, creating hideous cracks that resembled gaping, bloody mouths, a display of raw ferocity and danger. Cold sweat trickled down the bridge of Akira's nose, his nerves stretched to their limit. Well, not bad at all. Yoruichi praised, you're the first freshman to dodge my punch. Since you're so talented, let's raise the difficulty a bit. It'll serve as a lesson for the other freshmen too. Hand-to-hand combats, being the last resort for the Shinigami, must be mastered by every academy student before graduation. Consider this some extra tutoring. As the staggering students turned their gaze to the two in the arena, she moved again. To everyone's surprise, they found their eyes could actually track the girl's movements this time. Though extremely difficult to comprehend, if they forced themselves to remember it, this could still be considered a hand-to-hand combat's secret technique. In contrast, Akira's gaze appeared slightly dazed, his body still as a statue. Seeing this, Yoruichi shook her head in disappointment. Though the sky was quite impolite, a small lesson would suffice. However, in his world, the moment she launched her attack, her posture was instantly broken down into dozens of parts. Arms, legs, waist, torso, even the slight tremors in front were meticulously distinguished. At this moment, Akira was like a dry sponge, eagerly absorbing the key points of this hand-to-hand combat's technique. In just a brief moment, he had grasped and digested all its advantages and disadvantages, transforming them into his own. Heart of a god. As he fully grasped the rhythm of Yoruichi's technique, he realized the true potential of his unique trait, Heart of a god. While it didn't grant him raw power, it offered limitless potential. With this ability alone, he could reach the pinnacle of skill. A brilliant light flickered in his eyes, and his aura transformed dramatically. Aizen, now at the sidelines, watched his friend in the arena with keen interest. The slight curve of his lips betrayed that his mood was far from calm. Yoruichi noticed Akira's change, but she was already committed to her attack. Gritting her teeth, she charged towards the seemingly defenseless young man, her fist exploding forward. John Jankin. Slap. With a crisp sound, Akira's palm met Yoruichi's fist, a movement as light and gentle as lovers playfully tussling. Yet the moment they connected, it erupted into a heart-palpitating boom, sending surging waves of energy in all directions. Though it caused no major damage, the academy students who had suffered her beatings stood dumbfounded, scarcely believing their eyes. He blocked it? How could he possibly do that? Countless similar thoughts crashed like waves through everyone's minds. They couldn't fathom the scene before them, and were even more reluctant to accept that they might lose to an unknown shrine priest from a small shrine. Over their time as classmates, The academy students had gradually learned about Akira's background. Despite his status as a shrine priest, this young man, hailing from Rakongai, still paled in comparison to the wealthy and noble inhabitants of Syriite Ai. Yet this commoner had momentarily matched a prodigy from the Shioing family in the hand-to-hand combats test. "Oh, you blocked it." Yoruichi looked up at the tall young man, her delicate face showing surprise. "That's unexpected. To think you'd use this method to counter. Are you a hand-to-hand combats genius?" As her words reached his ears, Akira maintained a calm exterior, but beneath the surface, his mental state was approaching chaos. The difference in strength between them had become too great to ignore. Even receiving her punch with his palm had nearly shattered the bones in his hand. If not for his iron will and determination to maintain his dignity, he would have cried out in pain. Endure, he must endure. He couldn't let his hard-earned reputation crumble here. Yoruichi seemed to notice his struggle. She chuckled, her slender wrist turning as she launched another hand-to-hand combats technique. This time, it was close quarters grappling. The brutal force acted on his arms, severely limiting his movement. Fortunately, Akira managed to free her right hand, giving himself a glimmer of hope. Yoruichi pressed her advantage, unleashing increasingly exquisite hand-to-hand combats techniques. Her movements grew swifter and fiercer, like a terrifying hurricane threatening to engulf him completely. Yet, in the face of such overwhelming power, Akira was like a small boat on a vast ocean, seemingly on the verge of capsizing, but always managing to cleverly stay afloat. Under her strong suppression, he continuously utilized his heart of a god, learning the true essence of the hand-to-hand combats techniques even as they threatened to overwhelm him. As the two continued their intense battle, Marikyo, watching from the sidelines, noticed something odd. Wait a minute. How had the two of them ended up so entangled during their fight? Yoruichi had Akira's right hand pinned against his chest. Her legs were wrapped around his neck in a scissor hold, and only his left hand blocking her thighs prevented his head from being crushed. Meanwhile, his legs were locked around her waist. Both fighters were restraining each other, with Akira seemingly having a slight positional advantage. He knew that Yoruichi's competitive spirit had kept her from using her spiritual pressure, relying solely on technique, a weakness he'd managed to exploit. In a true life-or-death battle, he suspected she would have obliterated him instantly. Lady Yoruichi has Akira in a lock. No, you're wrong. From where I'm standing, Akira has Lady Yoruichi locked. The heated debate among the academy students finally snapped Marikyo out of his daze. As he came to his senses, he realized just how suggestive the fighter's posture had become. Off to the side, Aizen's gaze intensified, a hint of intrigue in his eyes. Interesting. Another genius in hiding, just like himself? Chapter 6. As the two were locked together, Yoruichi's cheeks flushed slightly. Though barely noticeable due to her dark skin, her expression betrayed intense excitement. A pleasant cracking sound followed. Crack. Her face stiffened, and she instinctively released her scissor lock. Just as she was about to make her next move, Akira sharply inhaled and said through gritted teeth, "Don't move. It's broken." The evenly matched skills had sent Yoruichi into such an excited state that she momentarily lost control of her spiritual pressure and strength. This brief outburst crushed his arm mercilessly, even though he noticed the abnormality at the critical moment and immediately unleashed all of his own spiritual pressure. His actual spirit class is rank 17. For context, the standard for a Shinigami officer is rank 20, a lieutenant is rank 4 or 5, and rank 3 and above is captain level. Akira's current personal status shows his spiritual pressure as level 20, which corresponds exactly to rank 17 spirit class if calculated based on a maximum of 100. While this level might be considered outstanding among many academy students, compared to Yoruichi, the difference was vast. The moment she unleashed her spiritual pressure, Akira personally experienced what it meant to face an insurmountable gap, to truly confront an impassable divide. As their spiritual pressure clashed, he envisioned towering mountains collapsing and endless mudslides surging forward in a magnificent spectacle, obliterating his stubborn resistance with overwhelming force. Yoruichi, seeming to notice her loss of composure, released his right arm, now twisted like a pretzel, with an embarrassed smile. His entire arm was grotesquely contorted, its bones and muscles pulverized by the brutal spiritual pressure and force, causing the skin to turn a horrifying deep purple. Akira attempted to move his right hand, but it remained unresponsive. "Little righty, don't you dare die on me." His exaggerated expression, tinged with genuine pain, was mostly for show. However, it made Yoruichi feel even more guilty, to the point where she couldn't meet his gaze. The over-the-top display made Aizen's expression stiffen. He suddenly realized that being friends with this guy might not be such an honorable endeavor after all. Marikyo appeared before Akira, frowning as he carefully examined the limp, twisted right arm. After a moment, he let out a sigh of relief. "It's not severe enough to require amputation. However, the Kido Corps doctors likely can't handle such a serious injury. Marikyo turned to the lectern and quickly wrote out a certificate, detailing the incident. Take this to the 4th Division's Coordinated Relief Station. Captain Urahara will personally treat you. Sosuke Aizen, accompany him. Aizen nodded reluctantly. Yoruichi raised her hand, seemingly wanting to go along. But after seeing Marikyo's pleading look, she pouted and temporarily abandoned the idea. After the two left, he dismissed the other students for the day. Soon, only the two of them remained in the classroom. He let out a heavy sigh and looked at the unrepentant dark-skinned young woman. Lady Yoruichi, you promised me you wouldn't act recklessly. This time the boy was lucky, only breaking an arm. If you had locked his head, the consequences could have been dire. Yoruichi defended herself. This wasn't reckless, I just got caught up in the moment. At the beginning of the fight, that guy's hand-to-hand combat skills were quite ordinary, but as the battle progressed, she frowned, suddenly realizing something unsettling. She had focused solely on hand-to-hand combats due to her Zanpakuto's nature, achieving outstanding results that even high-ranking officers couldn't match. But in the recent battle, that young man's progress could no longer be described as merely rapid. It was as if he was cheating. Every technique she used was quickly assimilated by him in a very short time, then performed even more perfectly. Such a genius would easily outclass many members of the Shioing family. He might even rival a captain. As she pondered in silence, Marikyo sensed the strange atmosphere and cautiously spoke up. Lady Yoruichi? The dark-skinned young woman suddenly looked up, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Marikyo, what do you think? How about recruiting this guy as a son-in-law for the Shioing family? Yoruichi's sudden leap in logic made his eyes widen. He inhaled sharply, feeling a stinging pain between his teeth. Yet, compared to the toothache, he was far more troubled by her suggestion. From the intelligence about Akira often performing exorcisms for female classmates, this guy's level of lechery rivaled, if not surpassed, that of the 8th Division's Captain Shun Sakuraku. If Lady Yoruichi chose to use herself as bait, Akira would undoubtedly agree. Contemplating this, Marikyo's burly body shuddered, as if he had foreseen a terrifying future. After all, the Omega family was closely tied to the Shioing family. On the small path leading to the 4th Division barracks, two young men in academy uniforms walked side by side. It would have been a harmonious scene if not for the constant wailing of one embarrassing fellow. Sosuke, do you think my little righty can truly be restored? With Captain Urahara's medical skills, it shouldn't be a problem. That's wonderful. Little righty is my beloved friend and brother. I'd rather die than see it harmed. Aizen sighed helplessly at his friend's dramatics. Shouldn't a normal person be crying out from the pain of such a severe injury? Why was this guy so fixated on whether his right arm could be restored? And what was with the strange nickname Little Righty? Because his name contained the character for right, every time Akira wailed Lil Righty, he felt an odd discomfort. It was as if he wasn't mourning his right hand, but mourning Aizen himself. The mental image this conjured was so disturbing that even the usually composed Aizen couldn't help but shudder, quickening his pace towards the 4th Division barracks. Due to the vast size of the Siri Itai, even though the two moved at their fastest speed, it still took nearly a day to reach their destination. After presenting the certificate given by Marikyo, the guard Shinigami not only let them pass but also assigned someone to guide them. Soon, the group arrived at a spotless hospital room. The moment Akira stepped inside, a familiar voice sounded in his ears. Chapter 7 An Unexpected Delight. Akira's eyes lit up, momentarily forgetting the bone-chilling pain in his right hand. He had assumed only significant locations like the Shino Academy would meet the check-in conditions, yet a mere private ward also fulfilled the requirements. Kaido, or healing spiritual arts, is a branch of Kido. While it lacks destructive power, it's indispensable in logistics. The 4th Division is the largest among the 13 Division of Imperial Guards. Unlike Akira, who stared at the black-haired woman before him with an unabashedly lewd gaze, Aizen instinctively tensed up the moment he sensed her presence, naturally suppressing his vast spiritual pressure. The pure white, voluminous captain's hair, embroidered with the character 4, draped down. Her thick black hair, braided and falling in front, concealed an impressive figure. Her exquisitely beautiful face bore a gentle, kind smile, exuding an innate warmth. The respectful, admiring gazes of the guard Shinigami and 4th Division members nearby clearly indicated her high status within the division. 4th Division Captain, Retsu Urahara. However, in Aizen's eyes, it was an entirely different scene. A vast sea of blood pressed down from above. An extreme, bone-chilling cold permeated the surroundings. Endless killing intent seeped through every pore, reaching deep into his internal organs. It was truly spine-chilling. He subconsciously ignored her beautiful, gentle face. The person sitting there wasn't the beloved Captain Urahara, but a vicious demon returned from the depths of hell. Was this the true worth of a 13 Division of Imperial Guards captain? Aizen had never encountered other captains before. Urahara was the first he'd met since arriving in the Siriite AI. The slight contempt he had harbored before vanished instantly. If all the captains were like this woman, perhaps the Siriite AI wouldn't be as dull as he had imagined. Suppressing his inner thoughts, he supported Akira as they approached Urahara. Two peculiar young men in blue and white Shino Academy uniforms stood before her, one with an inappropriate gaze, the other wary of his surroundings. How odd. Neither seemed to show a hint of due respect. "Academy student, please come closer," Urahara said gently. "Your injury can't be left untreated any longer." Hearing this, Akira snapped back to reality. He sat directly opposite her, lifting his numb right hand and placing it on her thigh, the most convenient position given how they were seated. Urahara was momentarily taken aback but didn't dwell on it. Adhering to her professional ethics, she carefully examined his injured hand and began the healing process. She extended her fair hands, her fingers moving gracefully as emerald green Kaido light blossomed from her fingertips. Strong spiritual pressure flowed into the deep purple skin. A tingling sensation arose from deep within the bones, accompanied by crisp sounds as the twisted bones realigned. To her surprise, Akira remained stoic throughout the treatment, not uttering a single cry of pain. As the 4th Division captain with the highest Kaido and medical skills in Soul Society, she had treated countless patients and encountered many individuals with strong willpower. But a contradictory existence like Akira was unprecedented. His lecherous gaze suggested he was cut from the same cloth as Shunsei, Kiraku. Such men usually lacked willpower, their minds clouded by their lustful nature. A young man both lecherous and strong-willed was truly a rare sight. Even Aizen seemed surprised as he reassessed Akira, as if seeing him anew. Well, no need to look at me with such admiring eyes, Sosuke," Akira said with a grin. "As a man, this little pain is nothing. Even if it were 10 times stronger, I wouldn't show the slightest." Before he could finish, his face suddenly contorted, his features scrunching up to their limits. "Ah, sorry, I forgot to warn you." A gentle voice reached both their ears as Urahara smiled. "To correct fractured bones, they need to be crushed and then reconstructed. This way, there won't be any after effects." Looking at the gentle face so close to him, Akira gained a clear understanding of a demon's smile for the first time. How devious. The treatment process was mercifully brief. As the Kaido light faded, Akira felt his right hand regain its former vitality. "For follow-up treatment, you'll need medication," Urahara said, instructing a squad member to bring external use ointment. She explained the method and frequency of use in detail, then added, "Also, the treatment fee comes to 1,123, equals can. Will you two be paying on credit or in cash?" Akira's eyes widened in disbelief. He never imagined such cruel words could come from such a pretty mouth. "I never said the treatment was free, you know," Urahara said with a smile. "Akira, this was mentioned in class." Aizen sighed. "Except for Shinigami squad members injured on duty, all other injuries and illnesses require paid treatment." "Don't tell me you weren't listening?" Our poor, naive little priest's face fell. He had no interest in anything other than sword art, hand-to-hand combats, flash steps, and Kido. In most classes, he usually passed the time daydreaming and dozing off. Come to think of it, he was clearly the victim, so why did he have to pay the bill himself? "Sosuke, we're friends, right?" Akira's eyes rolled. "Could you possibly?" Before he could finish, Aizen cut him off flatly. "No, I can't. I'm broke." Both were commoners, and even though Akira was a shrine priest at Sakaon Shrine, he hadn't managed to save much money. As for Aizen, his pockets were emptier than his expression. Strictly speaking, he didn't have much desire for money. Otherwise, with his abilities, he could easily achieve financial freedom. Seeing his good friend abandon him, Akira miserably chose to pay on credit, promising that if he couldn't repay before joining a squad, he'd join the 4th Division and start from the bottom as a squad member. On the street outside the squad barracks, Akira stood with his arms folded, brows furrowed. After this incident, he realized the importance of money. With this thought, he suddenly raised his head. "Sosuke. Let's go make some money together." Chapter 8, Fleecing a Rich Dog. My name is Sosuke Aizen, a first-year student at the Shino Academy. Thanks to my considerable aptitude, I was placed in Elite Class 1. Initially, I intended to use the academy as a platform to uncover secrets and find peers who could match my intellect. But how did things end up like this? On a small path in the academy, there's a table adorned with a fan and a ruler. A banner flutters in the wind, proclaiming, "Chief Priest of Sakaon Shrine." Akira sits behind the table, affecting an air of importance, while I stand behind him, arms crossed and expressionless. "Sosuke, don't just stand there like an idiot," he whispers urgently, I'm the chief priest, I can't lower myself to hawking my wares. So it's fine if I lower myself, is it? Hearing the crowd's chatter buzzing around me like flies, I decide to keep my thoughts to myself. I'm already regretting having greeted this guy when I first enrolled. In all my decades of life, Akira is the most unprincipled person I've ever encountered. I never imagined his money-making schemes would extend to expanding the Saga-owned shrine's business within the academy. It's even more outrageous than before. Exorcisms, blessings, prayers, communicating with deities, peddling various talismans, he dabbles in every possible shrine-related business. He appears omnipotent, but in reality, he's a jack of all trades, master of none. I shake my head, waiting for his inevitable crash and burn. My name is Sajan Kuachiki, eldest son of the Kuachiki clan, one of the 5 noble families. Despite having professional tutors and my father's personal guidance, I chose to study at the Shino Academy. Here, I can experience things beyond the confines of my family's estate. Just like now. Saga-owned shrine? He stared at the black characters on the banner, lost in thought. If he remembers correctly, this shrine seems... Hey, don't pass by without a look. Fortune in career, love, and wealth, young man, what are you waiting for? Seeing a potential customer approach, Akira greeted him enthusiastically. Sajan's expression freezed, sensing something off about this vendor's words. Fortunately, his kind and gentle nature prevented him from dwelling on these details. He smiled and asked, do you have any talismans that can protect the wearer from illness and misfortune? Hearing this, Akira is greatly disappointed, feeling his talents are wasted. He can only pick out a talisman from those displayed on the table to hand to the young noble. Sajan took the talisman and examined it carefully. As the heir of a great noble family, his knowledge is quite extensive. Due to his naturally weak constitution, his father, Jinrai Kuachiki, has gone to great lengths for him. He has seen hundreds of different talisman styles, but this is the first time he's encountered one like this. The delicate white wooden chip, wrapped in a red string, is adorned with an unusual pattern, a huge black right hand enveloped in luxurious clothing. Its anthropomorphic posture gives a sense of sacredness and inviolability. On the back of the right hand, a single eye is slightly closed, its indifferent gaze fixed ahead. It seems familiar. Sajan mused, fiddling with the talisman as he tried to recall the source of this familiarity. For this unique and powerful talisman, the price is just a tiny and insignificant amount of 1,000. Akira said with a crooked merchant's smile, naming an exorbitant price. Sajan frowned slightly, realizing the inappropriateness of this price. Young man, don't hesitate. Akira cajoled, the Saga-owned shrine is renowned. The one-eyed great deity will surely bless you with good health. After a moment's hesitation, Sajan took out a 1,000 bill and handed it to him. Just then, an angry voice bellowed from the end of the distant street. Akira Kisaragi, Sosuke Aizen. How dare you behave so recklessly within the Shino Academy? Akira cursed under his breath, then with a wave of his hand, he lifted the table. Sosuke. It's getting windy out here. Time to make like a tree and leave. To the astonishment of the 2 onlookers, he carried the table and dashed off at an incredible speed, disappearing from sight. Young man, the Saga-owned shrine offers after-sales service. If you need anything, came to East Rakongai, District 76. Before he could finish, his figure had completely vanished. Seeing this, Aizen's mouth twitched. He nodded to Sajan, then chased after Akira's escape route. His speed was even greater than that of this quack shrine priest. By the time Urui, their teacher, arrived at the scene, only Sajan was left standing there. Lo Lord Sajan. That Akira fellow didn't say anything strange to you, did he? Realizing the identity of the person before him, Urui felt a headache coming on. That bastard didn't con this young master of the Kuachiki family, did he? You should know, Sajan had an excellent reputation in the Shino Academy, known for his gentleness and kindness, without any of the airs of a great noble. If that guy had conned such a good person, he'd truly be beyond redemption. Sajan shook his head with a wry smile, no. Hearing this, Urui breathed a sigh of relief, his tense nerves relaxing a bit. That's good. I'll go chase those 2 guys now. Lord Sajan, please excuse me. Sajan nodded slightly in acknowledgement. After Urui left, he raised his right hand, fingers spread. On the white wooden chip tied with a red string, the deep single eye gazed indifferently ahead. Perhaps it was an illusion, or maybe it was truly effective. While holding this talisman, Sajan felt his body become somewhat lighter. It was as if half of the accumulated impurities had been cleared away. After a moment of examination, he clutched the talisman tightly and said in a low voice, Akira Kisaragi, is it? I'll remember this name. In the first-year dormitory, Akira put down his belongings and flopped unceremoniously onto the soft bed. Beside him, Aizen pondered a question. Why had he followed this fool in such an undignified escape through the Shino Academy? Could stupidity be contagious? What a haul! Akira's cheer soon attracted his attention. As expected, fleecing rich dogs is the quickest way to make money. Rich dogs? Didn't you notice? That guy had a star-pulling hairpin, an accessory only upper-class nobles are allowed to wear. Is that why you charged him such a high price? Aizen's tone suddenly became calm, his scrutinizing gaze falling on his friend. How narrow-minded. Akira turned over, looking at him with disdain. That talisman is genuine, 1,000 is, if anything, too little. Infused with the spiritual pressure of the one-eyed great deity, it's one of the few masterpieces of the Sakaon shrine. Aizen frowned slightly, asking in confusion, the deity worshipped by the Sakaon shrine is called the one-eyed great deity? Akira nodded, grinning, the object that commemorates the Spirit King's right arm, the one-eyed great deity. Mimogai. Chapter 9 Mimogai. Aizen looked puzzled, having never heard such a name before. But judging from the phrase the thing that commemorates the Spirit King's right arm, if everything Akira said was true, this one-eyed great god named Mimogai might indeed hold a great secret. So, do you believe in gods, young man? Akira rolled off the bed, striking a pose like a mystical guru. An air of profound mystery emanated from him, momentarily fooling his opponent. Aizen, however, quickly came to his senses, rubbing his forehead and sighing helplessly. He had a feeling that, under someone's influence, his path was veering towards some unpredictable abyss. In the dojo classroom, two figures faced off, gripping bamboo swords. Their oars clashed fiercely, a valiant killing intent spreading wildly, or so Akira imagined. In reality, under Uruoi's merciless pressure, he was already considering admitting his mistake. But he hesitated. He had worked hard to establish his persona as a great, handsome and trustworthy shrine priest at the Shino Academy. If he admitted his errors so easily, how would he deceive the gullible in the future? What about his sweet money? You little brat. Uruoi growled, his forehead veins bulging. It's one thing to fool others normally, but this time you've gone too far. You've fooled Lord Sajun Kuachiki. You don't seem to know how to write the word death. It's fortunate Lord Sajun didn't hold it against you, otherwise. He trailed off with a menacing Humphrey. Akira frowned. That rich bastard is from the Kuachiki family? Sajun Kuachiki. Such a familiar name. Ignoring his muttering, Uruoi raised his bamboo sword. His aura surged violently, forming an invisible whirlwind around him. Words are useless. I must teach you a profound lesson to make you remember your mistake. Be careful, Kisaragi. This time, I, your teacher, won't show any mercy. His body sank slightly, his shoulders dropping as he suppressed his anger. The violent aura vanished momentarily. In the next instant, that withdrawn aura erupted. Uruoi charged forward like a fierce tiger descending a mountain, his bamboo sword raised high. The sharp strike fell straight down, as if to cleave the very air in two. As the designated homeroom teacher for elite students, he was exceptional in sword dart and flash steps, despite his average spiritual pressure. If not for his slightly lower spiritual pressure, he would have been at least an officer-level Shinigami, rather than teaching full-time at the Shino Academy. Enormous pressure bore down as the flat bamboo sword transformed into a tiger's bloody maw. A faint roar seemed to echo, deafening to the ears. Akira drew in a sharp breath, instinctively raising his sword to defend. Whack! The loud impact plunged the dojo into silence, countless gazes focusing on the two. The other students were already used to Uruoi beating Akira. But surprisingly, today their teacher seemed particularly serious. Even more surprising was that the famous shrine priest's performance seemed a bit above par. He actually blocked it? This Akira kid's hand-to-hand combat skills were already monstrous, and now his sword dart is as strong too? No wonder my father warned me not to underestimate anyone. The Shino Academy truly is full of hidden talents. Aizen's expression remained calm, but his slightly flickering gaze revealed a hint of interest. Previously, Akira's hand-to-hand combat with Yoruichi wasn't enough to determine his talent. But if his sword dart was as impressive as his hand-to-hand skills, then he could be certain that this friend of his was a genius just like himself. Uruoi's attack was astonishing, his bamboo sword becoming a storm of strikes, weaving a net of heaven and earth, trapping Akira within. It seemed he could be utterly destroyed at any moment. Caught in the onslaught, Akira was in dire straits. His fraudulent teacher's battle experience was on a completely different level from Yoruichi's. The age difference meant that Uruoi had been through more battles than the young woman had eaten meals. The method of learning and countering moves on the fly simply couldn't apply to the current scenario. He could only rely on his inherent combat skills to respond. He was now like a small boat on a turbulent sea, on the verge of total collapse at any moment. If he hadn't completed the check-in at Hurahara's place and greatly increased his sword dart level, he might have fallen in the first round of confrontation. But what he didn't know was that Urui was even more surprised at this moment. As a homeroom teacher, he was very familiar with the abilities of each student, even the often irritating Akira. His hand-to-hand combat skills had already given him quite a surprise. He didn't expect that in such a short time, this kid's sword dart had also improved to another level. Is this what they call a genius? Thinking of this, Urui couldn't help but feel a bit more appreciative of talent, and then he struck even harder. An untended sapling grows crooked, an undisciplined person becomes unruly. As an elite teacher, he must guide every genius back to the right path. This was his responsibility. The sudden increase in pressure made Akira suffer greatly. Gritting his teeth, he desperately sought a way to break the deadlock. Surrendering was out of the question. Even if he did, he'd still get beaten. His stinky teacher was just that straightforward. Realize your mistake, kid. Urui increased his force again, his footwork shifting, forcing Akira to retreat repeatedly until he was less than 3 meters from the wall. Go and repent for your mistakes properly, then get back on the right track. Roaring, he gripped the sword with both hands, swinging down with the force of splitting a mountain, a move without frills, just pure power and speed. And a tiny bit of spiritual pressure. Akira held his breath, focusing intently. His heart of a god exerted itself to the utmost, his max-level talent instantly reaching its peak. The world in his eyes seemed to freeze. Urui's technique was dissected into dozens of parts in an instant: power techniques, spiritual pressure flow, strengths and weaknesses, everything was grasped in the shortest time. Akira's eyes flickered with light, brilliant as the stars. There's no need to be stronger than you. Just a moment of carelessness, and I can seize the rhythm of victory. His fingers gripped tightly, the bamboo sword's handle emitting a creaking lament. All his strength focused on it, strands of bamboo fiber snapping and bursting. This strike, he blocked it. His legs slightly bent, arms crossed, blocking his ugly teacher's sure kill strike in an odd posture. Looking at the young face so close, Urui's gaze suddenly froze. It seemed his teaching purpose had failed. Akira raised his head, grinning. Teacher, have you ever been defeated? An inexplicable sense of foreboding spread in Urui's heart. Before he could answer, Akira closed in, the bamboo sword sliding down askew, countless bamboo fibers completely bursting. Urui's eyes widened, his gaze revealing disbelief as a violent sound echoed in his ears. The broken bamboo sword fell directly on his chest. The next moment, he flew past countless shocked gazes to the end of the dojo, tracing a beautiful parabola before finally landing on the wooden door at the entrance. Boom. On this day, Akira's name resounded throughout the Shino Academy. Chapter 10. In the classroom, the Shinigami teacher on the podium spoke animatedly, lecturing about the history of the Soul Society. From the glory of the royal family to the rise of the 5 noble houses, to the establishment of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, he even mentioned the war between the Shinigami and the Quincy clan hundreds of years ago. Even to this day, Quincy's still wandered in the world of the living. Below the podium, a rather peculiar scene unfolded. 99% of the students sat neatly at the front, attentively listening to the teacher's lecture. At the back of the classroom, however, several rows of seats were empty, with 2 slightly thin figures sitting at separate desks. One of them listened attentively, no different from the other students. The other had his head buried in the crook of his arm, seemingly in a state of hibernation. The teacher on the podium noticed this scene and, hesitating to speak, could only vent his pinned-up frustration by raising his voice by several notches. However, this commotion was like a lullaby to Akira. When the strong and forceful voice reached his ears, he fell into an even deeper sleep. Aizen glanced sideways at his troublesome friend, a hint of helplessness flashing in his eyes. Perhaps this was a true portrayal of interest as the best teacher. Ever since Akira had sent Urui flying with 1 sword strike in the sword dart class, his quality of life had been on a straight upward trajectory. Countless elite students, having witnessed his true strength, developed a deep-seated awe for him. No matter where, the strong are always respected. The Shino Academy was no exception. This news spread like wildfire, quickly circulating throughout the entire academy. Whether teachers, students, or even the principal, everyone knew that a true genius had emerged in Class 1A. In just a few months since entering the academy, he was already capable of overwhelming teachers, and his spiritual pressure even surpassed that of an average Shinigami squad member. An undisputed genius, Akira Kisaragi. Yet this guy didn't play by the rules at all. Although he chose to listen attentively in classes like sword art, hand-to-hand combats, flash steps, and even practical combat courses, when it came to cultural classes, he would start snoring away, showing not a hint of the pride or attitude a genius should have. He spent his days fooling around, occasionally coming up with unexpected ideas. These included night raids on the Shino Academy cafeteria, tampering with disciplinary notices, or offering to exorcise and consecrate female classmates, and so on. The key was that if he were doing these things alone, it would be fine, but every time he prepared to cause mischief, he would drag along his friend. In Akira's words, good brothers should share in the joys, while you alone bear the hardships. Although it's unclear where he heard such a twisted saying, he always strictly adhered to it. That's all for today's lesson. The history teacher announced from the podium, his expression serious. The genius and handsome pupil stirred from his slumber. Is class over? Akira mumbled, bleary-eyed and disoriented. Our final exams are in a month. The teacher continued, although practical skills are the most important course for Shinigami, cultural classes cannot be neglected either. For this exam, any student who fails to pass will be given a major demerit of probation. At the word demerit, Akira suddenly perked up, turning to look pitifully at Aizen beside him. Sosuke, we're good brothers, right? Aizen remained silent. You surely can't bear to see me fail the exam, right? You see, during the exam, Akira had somehow slid next to Aizen, familiarly draping himself over the other's shoulder, already brainstorming his usual mischievous ideas. The next class is Jinzen. Aizen said, standing up from his seat, you should first think about how to complete the most basic meditation. If I remember correctly, as of last night, you still couldn't complete the first step of Sword Zen. Failing cultural classes is one thing, but if you can't obtain your own Zanpakuto, even if you graduate smoothly, you won't be able to join the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. Perhaps your only choice will be the Kido Corps. Akira was stunned, his good brother's sudden backstab leaving him momentarily heartbroken. But at this point, he could only grit his teeth and push on. Although he wasn't sure of the exact reason, it seemed he was naturally incompatible with his Zanpakuto. From the initial choice of Asaki to the current understanding of Jinzen, even the worst students could vaguely sense the power of their swords. Yet he couldn't even complete the most basic sword Zen, let alone unleash the power of his Zanpakuto. Wasn't it said that Zanpakuto were forged based on a Shinigami soul? So why was he naturally incompatible with his own soul? Could it be that he was just purely stubborn, or dumb? With hearts filled with trepidation and doubt, Akira and Aizen arrived at the Jinzen dojo. The spacious room exuded a Zen-like tranquility. A faint fragrance lingered in the air, inducing a dreamy state that made one feel as if floating on clouds. This was the special Rishi incense of the Jinzen dojo, used to help new Zanpakuto wielders enter the state of Sword Zen more quickly, facilitating smooth communication with their swords. Of course, this Rishi incense had little effect on those with strong willpower, like Akira and Aizen. The two sat cross-legged on cushions, assuming meditative postures, and began their meditation. Like the other students around them, Aizen quickly entered the state of Jinzen. Only Akira fidgeted, scratching his ears and face as if covered in lice. He couldn't understand why, even though he had followed the teacher's instructions and received Aizen's guidance, he still couldn't complete the most basic sword Zen. He stared blankly at the blade placed neatly across his knees. The shape, abilities, and state of a Zanpakuto are all forged based on the Shinigami soul. Shinigami gain power by knowing the name given to their Zanpakuto and engaging in spiritual dialogue with it. To be precise, the blade before him now couldn't be called a Zanpakuto, but rather an Asaki. Shinigami need to live and breathe with their Asaki, constantly honing it, imprinting the essence of their soul into it, thus creating their own Zanpakuto. However, Akira understood the theory. The problem was, how to imprint the essence of his soul into the Zanpakuto. It was like knowing that beyond the door lay the Shino Academy cafeteria and women's dormitory. If he could just open the door and walk in, he could enjoy endless happiness. But how to open the door? The conventional methods of Jinzen were completely ineffective for him. He folded his arms, furrowing his brow as he stared at his Asaki, countless thoughts flashing through his mind. Damn, even Mimagaya isn't as hard to communicate with as you. Akira muttered angrily. But just then, a flash of inspiration struck him like lightning. Wait a minute. What if I try to communicate with the Zanpakuto using the method for communicating with deities? With this thought, his gaze towards the blade on his knees filled with fiery enthusiasm. Chapter 11 There are 3 ways to communicate with the divine: blessing, prayer, and ritual. Unlike the Ai's family of shrine priests, the Saga-owned shrine, due to its small size and remote location, has limited methods for divine communication. Akira knew only these 3 methods, with prayer and ritual being the most common. Nanao had taught him the specific techniques. Having made his decision, he stood up abruptly. Disregarding the Jinzen class teacher's puzzled look, he left the dojo carrying his Asaki. As he disappeared, Aizen's half-closed eyes opened. Confusion flashed across his face. What's he up to now? Given his friend's penchant for the inconceivable and unreasonable, occasional truancy was hardly surprising. This kid is becoming more and more unruly. Jinzan teacher muttered, watching Akira leave. He wanted to intervene but, mindful of their difference in combat skills, held his tongue. After all, this troublesome student wasn't wielding a bamboo sword, it was a real asaki. Though not yet imbued with soul essence to become a true Zanpakuto, its durability and sharpness far surpassed a bamboo sword. If that reckless youth lost control, he, a mere Jinzan teacher, could end up at the blade's mercy. For his own safety, discretion seemed the better part of valor. "Teacher, I'll go bring him back," Aizen said after a moment's hesitation, curious to see what Akira was planning. Having obtained the teacher's permission, he quickly left the dojo as well. Following Akira's spiritual pressure trail, he chased him all the way to the dormitory area. The scene that unfolded there once again challenged his worldview and understanding of this unpredictable realm. He watched as his friend meticulously arranged talismans across the table, with candles burning, creating an eerie yet sacred atmosphere. A large black eye was engraved on a nearby banner, and a bronze bell swayed, emitting crisp metallic chimes. Carefully, Akira placed his asaki in the position typically reserved for enshrining deities. Under Aizen's puzzled gaze, the usually sunny and carefree Akira transformed. He became serious and solemn, his whole demeanor exuding a powerful mystical quality, just like a true shrine priest. This guy. Aizen mused, could he be attempting to complete Jinzan through a ritual method, to communicate with his own Zanpakuto? Clever as he was, he quickly grasped the essence of Akira's plan just by observing the preparation stage. His understanding stemmed not just from knowledge, but from his familiarity with his shrine priest. Due to Akira's unconventional ways, Aizen remained his sole friend at the Shino Academy. But wasn't Aizen in a similar position? Who would dare to casually mess with someone associated with Akira? Even Urui, a teacher, had already secured a private room in the infirmary. Others were even more hesitant to get involved with this enigmatic and reserved student. "In the name of the shrine priest, Akira, I perform this ritual." Akira's fingers fluttered like butterflies, forming intricate yet sacred hand seals. As he chanted, he focused his mind on the object of the ritual. What should the image of his Zanpakuto be? A simple sword? Countless images surged through his mind, only to be swiftly discarded. Though uncertain if this method would work, Akira knew he couldn't simply bluff his way through by imagining a Zanpakuto in his mind. Suddenly, a revelation about Zanpakuto flashed through his thoughts. Since it was essentially constructed from a Shinigami's soul, could he change the object of the ritual to himself? To communicate and dialogue with his own essence? His eyes brightened, reflecting the flickering candlelight as if brilliant stars were slowly forming within them. Having determined the object of the ritual, he used the asaki as a medium to proceed with the ceremony. As the bronze bell swayed, a sudden gust of wind arose in the room, lifting countless objects into the air. They collided, emitting sounds of shattering. Akira poured all his spiritual pressure into the bell, using this method to awaken the deity he needed to communicate with. In the midst of this, an invisible thread seemed to connect his soul to the asaki. Seeing this, Aizen's eyes widened, his usually calm, somewhat childish face now replaced with an expression of disbelief and shock. It actually succeeded. Using a ritual method to replace Jinzan, he had completed the communication between a Shinigami and their Zanpakuto. How on earth does this guy's brain work? Aizen thought, to come up with such an outrageous method. Surge, double, explode. The moment his soul connected with the asaki, Akira's spiritual pressure began to rise violently, forming a tangible pressure that covered the entire dormitory room. Had he any spare attention, he would have noticed, the data on his personal status panel was changing rapidly. Spiritual pressure, level 20, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. The numbers kept soaring, as if there was no upper limit. Compared to the changes on the status panel, the impact of his spiritual pressure on the surroundings was even more shocking. The wooden floor cracked layer by layer, the wallpaper and walls torn apart by the wind, swirling into the chaotic gale. Scattered objects collided and were ground to dust. What was even more perplexing was that the loudest sound in the room wasn't the howling of the wind, but the muffled impacts coming from his body. It was the beating of his heart. It was as if thunder from the sky had fallen into his chest cavity, pounding and resonating, seeming as though it would burst his chest open. Aizen's expression changed repeatedly. Indeed, not following the usual path would lead to completely different results. Akira, who never followed the beaten track, had directly arrived at an unfamiliar situation. Even for someone like Aizen, who had perfect scores in history class, he had never heard of anyone experiencing such a shocking change after communicating with their Zanpakuto. The spiritual pressure continued to rise. From the level of a standard Shinigami division member, it soared all the way to the level of a seated officer. Spiritual pressure, level 45, rank 12 spirit class. Looking at Akira, his eyes were now completely white, his expression dazed and blank, like a wooden statue. His consciousness, however, had arrived in a completely unfamiliar space. To be more precise, it should be called a world. Chapter 12. Aizen surveyed the scene, uncertain of what exactly had transpired with Akira. However, one thing was clear: if he didn't soon return from his sacrificial state, the entire Shino Academy men's dormitory would be uprooted. A heavy heartbeat, like rumbling thunder, synchronized with the earth's pulse. Fierce winds howled, walls trembled and crumbled. It was as if the earth itself was turning over. Heavy spiritual pressure erupted layer by layer, reminiscent of magma bursting from the earth's crust. Endless waves of heat rolled within a hurricane, engulfing everything around. Within seconds, Akira's room had been completely destroyed, leaving only a few intact wooden boards. The destructive force showed no signs of stopping, expanding like a hurricane to envelop the entire men's dormitory area. The violent commotion quickly drew the attention of students and teachers. Shinigami stationed at the Shino Academy arrived immediately, all staring in shock at the students standing at the hurricane center. Despite their limited understanding, they attempted to approach Akira, trying to awaken the dazed young man. As they crossed the shattered floor, another extremely heavy spiritual pressure suddenly bore down on them. Boom! The thick spiritual pressure crashed down, causing the earth to tremble under its unbearable weight. With each attempt to approach, the resistance grew more enormous, as if the air itself had become increasingly viscous. What on earth is happening to this kid? One Shinigami gritted out, such immense spiritual pressure, even a lieutenant might not match it, right? Damn it, we can't get close. Let's evacuate the nearby students before any casualties occur. The stationed Shinigami suddenly realized that when they moved away from Akira, the pressure on their bodies abruptly lightened, as if it had never existed. On edge, they didn't think too deeply and pinned all the anomalies and problems on this strange student. After all, the culprit responsible for the current scene was standing right there. Taking on a bit more blame seemed only natural. From the shadows, Aizen observed the squad member's departure, his face a mask of calm indifference. His earlier intervention served a single purpose: to prevent these impulsive individuals from meddling with Akira. Nothing more. His penetrating gaze returned to the hurricane's epicenter, eyes brimming with intrigue. Communicating with Asaki through a sacrifice ritual, imprinting the soul's essence, forging the nascent Zanpakuto, your approach is unparalleled. Fascinating. Aizen realized, with sudden clarity, that his initial greeting at enrollment had not been misplaced after all. In the vast, empty world, Akira found himself staring blankly at his surroundings. Is this my Zanpakuto's inner world? Drawing from his understanding of Zanpakuto and his experience watching anime in his previous life, he expected someone resembling him to appear. This doppelganger would claim to be his Zanpakuto and ramble about kings and steeds, ultimately explaining their difference was instinct. So Akira waited, anticipating the arrival of this character. After several minutes of foolishly squatting in place, he realized the danger of relying too heavily on past experiences. Looks like the Zanpakuto isn't coming, he muttered, standing up and scanning his surroundings. Are other people's Zanpakuto inner worlds as abstract as mine? As his gaze wandered, a familiar scene came into view, a place he had called home for several years. Memories flooded back, being beaten bloody over a bit of water, fighting vicious wild dogs for a rotten fried fish. This was the 76th district of East Rakongai, Sikaon. Rakongai comprised 4 main sections: East, South, West, and North, each divided into 80 districts, totaling 320. As the district numbers increased, so did the harshness of the environment. The 80th district was often barren and famine-stricken, with souls battling for survival. Sikaon, ranked just before it, was scarcely better. Akira had struggled there for a long time before reaching his turning point. He remembered it vividly. That day, Nanao's smile was as beautiful as a flower. Walking slowly along the familiar path, his eyes fell upon a solemn and magnificent shrine. Quickening his pace to confirm his suspicions, he entered. Inside, instead of the familiar statue of the one-eyed great deity, he encountered a figure both strange and familiar, a statue that looked exactly like him. "I've been enshrined as a deity?" he gasped, bewildered. Even with his intelligence, he struggled to comprehend the scene before him. Could it be that when he communicated with Asaki through sacrificial methods, the essence of his Zanpakuto had already changed? As Akira tried to make sense of the situation and reached out to touch the statue, the entire world began to collapse. With a moment of dizziness, Akira returned to the Shino Academy. His eyes met a pair filled with countless bloodshot veins. He instinctively stepped back, suddenly realizing that below those eyes was an extremely haggard and pale face. "Teacher Urui? Ah, you're still alive. That's great," Urui said expressionlessly, his words as lifeless as a dried-up corpse. "Now it's time to calculate the bill." Akira's heart skipped a beat. The entire men's dormitory was shattered by the commotion you caused. Not counting the damaged land, Just the buildings alone amount to a loss of 389,654. Considering you're a student, I'll round off the small change. Let's make it 390,000. 390,000. You might as well kill me. Akira's eyes widened in disbelief, and rounding up? You old fox, were you a swindler in your past life? Urui understood his meaning, but this kid had tormented him to the point of physical and mental collapse recently. He had no desire to explain further. The loss is what it is. If you have any questions, you can discuss it with the headmaster. He sighed. Also, let me tell you one more thing. The headmaster is temporarily away on a mission, so the captain commander is taking over the position for now. After all, he founded the Shino Academy. He wouldn't be at ease if just anyone was put in charge of managing it. So, that's all I have to say. You'd better take care of yourself. Urui sighed long and deep once again, his figure hunched as he walked away. Akira took a deep breath, his gaze falling on a certain shadow in the ruins. The person hiding in the shadows felt their heart skip a beat. However, before they could react, a familiar wail echoed throughout the ruins. Sosuke, save me. Chapter 13. Emerging from the shadows, Aizen felt a headache coming on as countless eyes focused on him. He disliked this kind of attention, otherwise, he wouldn't have hidden his true strength. But when you're stuck with a troublemaker like Akira, such trivial wishes become nothing but a luxury. Suddenly, he began to regret the greeting he had given when he first entered the academy. If only he had a choice. Sosuke, you can't just leave me to die. Akira rushed to his side, wailing, 390,000. That old geezer Urui just wants me dead. You're so smart, you must have a way out of this, right? Aizen's gaze was calm, his expression serene as he softly replied, actually. You already have a suitable plan in mind, don't you? If the future Aizen possessed the most penetrating gaze into the human heart, then the current version of him already had the makings of his future self. Perhaps he couldn't perfectly control people's hearts yet, but understanding someone wasn't a difficult task for him. After spending so much time with this shrine priest, if he still couldn't figure out what kind of person he was dealing with, then he wouldn't deserve to be called Aizen. Akira was a bit surprised. How did you know I was planning to fleece some rich fool? Aizen fell silent. He suddenly realized that perhaps he didn't understand him as well as he thought he did. Although 390,000 is a lot, it's not like there's absolutely no way out. Akira casually draped his arm over Aizen's shoulders, their posture bringing to mind a particular idiom. Partners in crime. I've asked around. That rich fool who bought the talisman is the sole heir of the Kuachiki family, the richest of the rich. Akira explained, his mood swing so rapid that even Aizen couldn't help but marvel. Because of his gentle and kind nature, he's known as the nice guy of the Kuachiki family. Few nobles are as approachable as him. You just need to cooperate with me like this. He rambled on endlessly, his expression extremely excited, just like when he had slashed Urui with one stroke. However, the joys and sorrows between people are not always shared, and Aizen only found him noisy. He knew that once this guy discovered him, nothing good would come of it. Well, now he'd become an accomplice. Their conversation wasn't overheard by others, as the passing Shinigami were preoccupied with how to rebuild the men's dormitory of the Shino Academy in the shortest possible time. They couldn't let the students sleep in the ruins, could they? That day, the Research and Development Group from the 12th Division entered the Shino Academy, led by a beautiful woman named Shutara Senchimaru. Under her command, a series of colorful fabric-woven house-like structures rose from the cleared areas, serving as temporary dormitories. The students were thus spared from having to sleep outdoors. Upon learning that Akira was the culprit, some courageous students challenged him to duels. After deliberation, dozens of elite 6th-year students, under the supervision of Station Shinigami, officially began a hand-to-hand combat duel. The Shino Academy, serving as a reserve for Shinigami, was no stranger to hot-blooded ruffians and hotheads who'd come to blows at the slightest provocation. To prevent frequent injuries and deaths from private fights, the captain commander had established dueling rules when founding the academy. These rules were comprehensive. Intentional killing was forbidden, duels required supervision by Shinigami officers or teachers, underhanded tactics were prohibited, elite students couldn't refuse duel challenges, and ordinary students couldn't challenge elite students at will, among other stipulations. Given Akira's astonishing sword dart skills, which had sent teacher Urui flying with a single slash, the students seeking revenge wisely chose challenge him in hand-to-hand combat. Naturally, Akira wouldn't refuse. When his consciousness returned from his Zanpakuto's inner world, he immediately noticed changes in himself. First was a surge in his spiritual pressure. Second was a sense of fullness in his spiritual body and soul, an overflow of rishi. It felt as if a balloon full of air had suddenly been filled with water. This strange sensation left him momentarily bewildered. Yet with these punching bags delivering themselves to his doorstep, how could he refuse his classmates' kind offer? A Keto barrier expanded, forming a large oval that enclosed both Akira and his challenger. The student challenging him was Takeo Matsushita, a towering, robust figure with hands as large as palm leaf fans and a face so meaty he looked more hollow than Shinigami. As an elite among the 6th-year students, Takeo was renowned in the Shino Academy for his hand-to-hand combat's expertise. He had already secured his future division placement before graduation. Moreover, during a practical training mission, he had once defeated a hollow with the strength of a formal Shinigami in direct hand-to-hand combat. One must face the consequences of their actions. His voice rumbled like thunder, deep and heavy, his mere presence exuding an oppressive aura. Cut the crap. Fight if you're going to fight, if not, then scram. Akira grinned, or are you scared? Takeo's rage swelled, his bulging muscles quivering, his already exaggerated physique expanding even further. Scared? Impossible. He was Takeo Matsushita, the man destined to become the strongest Shinigami captain. How dare this insignificant worm provoke him? Very well. You're the first to anger me before a duel. He raised his iron-like arm, pointing at Akira. You'll pay dearly for this. With the pre-fight banter concluded, the referee signaled to start. Takeo flexed his muscles and charged like an enraged bull. The ground trembled, dust clouds rising as his enormous, fan-like hand reached to grab. As his fingers closed, the air seemed to wail. Unlike Yoruichi's agile and varied hand-to-hand combat techniques, Takeo's moves were grand and straightforward, no frills. He leveraged his massive frame to full advantage, immovable as a mountain when still, devastating as an avalanche in motion. The Keto barrier's limited space left little room for evasion. Akira had no choice but to confront him head-on. Seemingly reckless, Takeo had actually calculated everything from the battle's start. Victory in this duel would surely be his. Foolish brat, pay for your actions. However, as his palm leaf fan-sized hand was about to land, Takeo, staring at the emotionless Akira, felt an inexplicable chill in his heart. Why isn't this kid dodging? Facing the looming shadow up close, Akira grinned. His fingers lightly stroked the air like plucking guitar strings, then suddenly clenched into a fist. With light footsteps, he stepped forward. Then, his relatively slender fist, accompanied by a sharp sound slicing through the air, erupted with a surge of energy, striking straight ahead. Chapter 14, everyone here is trash. Boom. A hurricane erupted, howling and surging. The violent impact exploded in front of Akira, transforming into chaotic air currents that struck in all directions. Takeo's heavy punch missed, leaving his front wide open. Akira seized the opportunity, landing a direct thrust punch on his robust chest. There wasn't a hint of spiritual pressure released, it was purely physical strength, or what's known as spiritual power. The world of Shinigami is strange. The souls of those who die in the living world separate from their physical bodies and come to the Soul Society. But if you think the souls in the Soul Society are purely spiritual, you'd be greatly mistaken. Most things in the Soul Society are composed of rishi, spirit particles, while most things in the living world are composed of matter particles. When souls arrive in the Soul Society, their bodies are reconstructed from rishi. In other words, whether commoners or nobles, their main components are rishi and souls. When not using spiritual pressure to fight, the strength, or spiritual power, contained within the spiritual body becomes the key to determining the outcome of a battle. Takeo felt as if he'd been hit head-on by a charging rhinoceros. The violent force contained in Akira's fist was not inferior to his own, and might even slightly exceed it. In an instant, his eyeballs bulged, filled with countless blood vessels, adding a peculiar color to his eyes. His thick, massive feet firmly planted on the ground, plowing 2 deep furrows under the enormous force pushing against him. Tough, that's quite some strength. Takeo wiped away the blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, then raised his hand and tore off his blue and white school uniform, revealing his towering physique. An intense, oppressive aura, like that of a giant beast, swept over everyone. However, I'm the man who's going to become a captain. His roar was like thunder, echoing throughout the entire battlefield, moving people with his demeanor. In contrast, Akira on the opposite side wore a bewildered expression, staring at his right fist in confusion, as if it were his first time in a fight, completely unable to understand the situation. This contemptuous attitude immediately angered Takeo's friends, with cheers and curses coming from all around, creating a cacophony. Aizen calmly gazed at the figure within the Keto barrier, a thoughtful emotion flashing in his eyes. He didn't understand. Why had Akira undergone such a dramatic change after communicating with Asaki? Not only had his spiritual pressure doubled, but his spiritual body seemed to have become more compact. The power contained within him had increased several-fold, far surpassing his previous capabilities. What exactly had happened? Akira was also pondering this question. However, with his limited knowledge and seemingly empty brain, he simply couldn't fathom what had occurred, even though these changes came from within himself. Forget it, I'm done thinking. He gave up on further taxing his brain cells. Clapping his hands together, he waved at Takeo across from him. Come on, big guy, let's continue. Takeo's breath escaped in two thick streams of white vapor, his entire being reminiscent of an enraged bull. Division member level spiritual pressure enveloped his body, enhancing his already formidable strength. With a violent stomp of his massive foot, Takeo's towering, muscular frame became a human cannonball, hurtling straight towards Akira. His right arm bent forward, launching an elbow strike in a crushing overhead attack towards his shorter opponent. His momentum was fierce and powerful, seemingly unstoppable. He had pushed his advantages to the extreme. This strike would be his strongest attack yet. Watching the massive black shadow charging towards him, Akira didn't meet it head-on like before. Instead, just as Takeo gathered his strength, he stepped back, his legs slightly bent. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he leapt into the air, perfectly evading his opponent's vicious elbow strike. Takeo looked up, his gaze fierce and his expression savage, immediately attempting to attack the airborne figure that couldn't change direction. The explosive power hidden in his tall frame, combined with his abnormally long arms, would allow him to easily reach a height of several meters. However, Akira didn't give him this opportunity. As he soared through the air, his excited voice rang out. Eat my Tenrin Gesso, Celestial Crescent Sweep. Takeo's eyes widened, he hadn't clearly heard what he had shouted. The intense pressure suddenly reminded him of his first encounter with a hollow, a terrifying body several times larger than his own, reeking of blood, savage and ferocious. It was suffocating. Instinctively, he crossed his arms in front of him, attempting to block Akira's attack. The next moment, crack, boom, a meteor fell. Fierce winds rose from the ground, kicking up countless clouds of dust like lava erupting from a volcano. Shockwaves radiated in all directions from the violent impact. Takeo's arms shattered upon impact, showing irregular, abnormal bruising. His towering frame crashed down, smashing a huge crater into the ground. As the dust settled, silence fell. Shock, astonishment, disbelief, incomprehension, such expressions flashed across the faces of the onlookers. Aizen sighed, rubbing his forehead, a hint of helplessness in his eyes. It seemed things were once again developing beyond his control. Who's next? As Akira gradually became familiar with his suddenly increased power, his confidence soared to unprecedented heights. Everyone here, without exception, was trash. Meanwhile, on a building north of the dual barrier, two figures, one tall, one short, stood by the railing, observing the scene. He's quite energetic, isn't he? The speaker was a bald old man with a graying beard hanging down his front. His long white eyelashes drooped to his gaunt cheekbones, and his bearing was calm and dignified, imposing without anger. Is this the Akira who destroyed the men's dormitory at the Shino Academy? Beside him, a white-haired, golden-eyed man who looked like a gentleman bowed his head respectfully. Yes, Captain Commander. Akira Kisaragi is from District 76 of East Rakongai, Sikaon, and is the priest of the local shrine. The dignified old man lowered his gaze to the young figure in the Keto barrier, his half-closed eyes masking his emotions. The Shino Academy is flourishing, Jinraiku Ichiki has done well. Whether it's Takeo Matsushita or Akira Kisaragi, they will both become part of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards in the near future, defending the justice of Soul Society. Geniuses should be treated differently. Chojiro Sasaki furrowed his brow slightly, not quite grasping the Captain Commander's meaning. Just as he was about to inquire, the old man beside him spoke again. True geniuses cannot be nurtured in a greenhouse. Experiencing cruelty in advance might be more beneficial for their growth. Chapter 15 Night had fallen. Moonlight cascaded like water, its cool rays bathing the colorful buildings and reflecting a unique, beautiful palette. Everyone returned to their temporary dormitories, minds reeling with shock and disbelief after witnessing the battle. This was destined to be a sleepless night. Initially, they had thought Akira's victory over Urui was just a fluke. But when he displayed his extreme violence under countless gazes, everything changed. Only then did the teachers and students of the Shino Academy realize they were dealing with an absolute monster. Be it spiritual pressure or combat techniques, among the students of the same generation, there was simply no one who could face him head-on. Take the tough-skinned Takeo, for instance. Struck by Akira's aerial flying kick, he suffered fractured arms and a collapsed chest cavity. On the spot, he could barely draw breath. The station Shinigami immediately called a stop to the duel, rushing Takeo to the infirmary at top speed, then directly transferring him to the 4th Division's coordinated relief station. While the Academy's teachers and students puzzled over his immense strength, they also began to ponder another question. What on earth is this celestial crescent sweep? In the temporary dormitory, Aizen furrowed his brows, perplexed. From his perspective, the hand-to-hand combat techniques Akira had just used in battle differed from those taught at the Shino Academy. Well, of course it's my own creation. Akira grinned, boasting shamelessly, a genius like me picked up quite a few skills during my previous duel with Yoruichi. The Shioing family's exclusive techniques, with just a bit of tweaking, become my own. He chose not to conceal it. Or rather, in front of Aizen, there was no need to hide such a trivial secret. As they spent more time together, Akira discovered that he wasn't as ambitious, cruel, or cold as he had imagined. Even viewing him through colored glasses, the impression remained the same. The current Aizen, aside from his strong curiosity, seemed little different from other students. Even in terms of talent, he appeared somewhat ordinary. Compared to Akira's recent brilliant performances, he seemed more like an ordinary sidekick. No exceptional talent, no notable background. While he might excel compared to ordinary people, in the talent-filled Shino Academy, he appeared somewhat commonplace. As for his personality, gentle, friendly, cautious, and careful, he rarely refused requests from friends. Even someone like this shrine priest could get along well with him. Perhaps this was Aizen's true face. Akira had once struggled to survive in the Sakaon district, witnessing countless facets of human nature. If the academy was the human world, then Sakaon was naked hell. He dared not claim to fully comprehend human nature. But at least, the danger instinct never lies. Due to time constraints, the temporary dormitory was a 4-person room. Unsurprisingly, Aizen and Akira were assigned to the same room. The other 2 roommates, upon learning that the famous and amiable shrine priest was also there, promptly chose to move out. Thus, only the 2 young men remained in the dormitory. After he explained the principle of celestial crescent sweep to him, Aizen's gaze towards his friend held a few more traces of surprise. Previously, when Akira had engaged in a hand-to-hand combat duel with Yoruichi, he thought he was merely imitating her techniques in a short time. Now he realized he had underestimated his friend. Akira could instantly master techniques just by experiencing them firsthand. Such talent even surpassed Aizen's own? You want to learn, huh? I'll teach you. Without waiting for Aizen to speak, Akira began an unreserved explanation on the cloth-woven floor, showing off, actually, Yoruichi's techniques aren't that difficult. She deliberately slowed down her speed. By analyzing the movements from the left lower leg and the right side of the waist, you can completely deconstruct the entire technique. Aizen had wanted to refuse, but seeing his enthusiasm, he didn't want to dampen his spirits. However, as he listened attentively, he narrowed his eyes slightly. The explanation was surprisingly accurate to the finest detail. Akira, you female-obsessed priest, is this your true face? After listening to the explanation, Aizen nodded thoughtfully and said in a clear voice, actually, I have another question. Akira rubbed his chin and raised an eyebrow. Is there something else you don't understand? No. Aizen shook his head. I want to ask about today's disturbance. What exactly did you do? He had witnessed the entire process of Akira communicating with his Asaki. Yet even with his knowledge and thinking, he still couldn't understand what had happened to him. Driven by curiosity, he chose to ask directly. The young man sitting on the opposite bed furrowed his brows upon hearing this question. Is it inconvenient to answer? Aizen's gaze lowered slightly, but he didn't voice his thoughts. For Shinigami, the Zanpakuto relates to everything about oneself, and not sharing it with others is quite reasonable. Even for him, it's the same. In this world, surely no one would be foolish enough to easily reveal their Zanpakuto's abilities to others? He wasn't surprised by Akira's reaction. Although the two had been inseparable during this time and appeared to be very good friends in others' eyes, in terms of trust, perhaps they hadn't reached the point of complete openness. To tell you the truth. Akira suddenly spoke, his brows still furrowed, I'm not clear about what exactly happened either. When I communicated with my Asaki through the method of sacrifice, my consciousness successfully entered the Zanpakuto's inner world. Then I returned to the most familiar place in my memory, the Sakaon district of Rakongai. And in the shrine where I worked, in the place where the statue of Mimogai should have been, my own stone statue was placed instead. Then, my consciousness returned. He calmly narrated all of this without concealment. In his view, this hardly counted as a secret. Compared to the absurd notion of gaining cheat abilities, the mystery of a Zanpakuto seemed rather insignificant. Moreover, he genuinely didn't understand what had happened to him. Rather than puzzling over it alone, it made more sense to confide in Aizen. Given his friend's insatiable curiosity, Akira knew he'd likely be intrigued. Aizen gazed at the young man before him with astonishment, experiencing trust from another person for the first time. He couldn't quite articulate his current thoughts, but a subtle feeling stirred within him. Perhaps, he mused, his lips curling slightly, To unravel what exactly happened to you, we should start by investigating the Sukaon Shrine. Chapter 16. The single eye watching everything in the darkness late into the night, the two engaged in a lengthy discussion. They still couldn't pinpoint exactly what had happened to Akira. However, one thing was undeniable: he had become dozens of times stronger since completing his unique Jinzen. The sudden surge in spiritual pressure alone would qualify him for immediate graduation and even an officer position in the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. Furthermore, the changes in his spiritual body, specifically the increase in spiritual power, enabled him to wield combat power far exceeding his current spiritual pressure level. Unable to grasp it all at once, Akira abandoned this brain-taxing endeavor and instead began to assess his recent growth in strength. He sprawled on the bed, eyes fixed on the vibrant cloth ceiling, and with a mere thought, his personal status panel materialized. Name: Akira Kisaragi. Identity: Sukaon Shrine Head Priest, Rakongai Commoner, Shino Academy First-Year Student. Spiritual Pressure, Level 46, Rank 12 Spirit Class, Sword Art, Level 32, Hand-to-Hand Combats, Level 21, Flash Steps, Level 20, Kido, Level 23, Exclusive Trait, Rishi Affinity, Danger Instinct, Heart of a God, Miraculous Healing, Light as a Feather. Compared to its simplicity when he first entered the academy, his personal status panel now looked far more impressive. Not only had his spiritual pressure skyrocketed, but even his basic combat skills, sword art, hand-to-hand combats, flash steps, and Kido, had improved significantly. While occasional lucky daily and monthly check-in rewards contributed, most of his progress stemmed from his own diligence and consistent practice. Akira's talent wasn't bad to begin with. His unique trait, Heart of a God, maximized his aptitude, while Rishi Affinity enhanced his spiritual power and spiritual pressure cultivation. If he persevered, he'd undoubtedly become a captain-class powerhouse in the future. Of course, he wouldn't stop there. Though uncertain about later developments in the Bleach world, he knew that even captain-class powerhouses were mere cannon fodder in the early stages, at best, slightly tougher cannon fodder. Looks like I don't have any major weaknesses. Akira mused, stroking his chin. I wonder how I stack up against Sosuke. From what I've seen, he seems pretty average. His sword art, hand-to-hand combats, flash steps, and Kido are middle of the pack in our class, and his spiritual pressure is nothing special. This level of strength doesn't do justice to his future badass status. While Akira analyzed his progress, Aizen lay on the opposite bed, hands crossed, gaze fixed on the ceiling. Countless thoughts raced through his mind as he compared, speculated, and gathered evidence, continuously cross-referencing various possibilities. Curiosity drove him to seek the true answer to the question. However, just as his mental faculties were operating at full speed, a muffled rumbling broke the dormitory silence. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. A mischievous voice quickly followed. Hee, Sosuke, what do you think? At this hour? The chefs at the academy cafeteria should be asleep, right? The next day, at the academy cafeteria, Akira listlessly played with the rice ball in front of him, his gaze mournfully fixed on the pickled cucumber beside it. At this moment, he felt that life was meaningless, and death was the ultimate destination for all living beings. Aizen, carrying his tray, sat opposite him. The sweet aroma of plum soup and the rich smell of meat cutlet immediately caught someone's attention. Even though you owe the academy 390,000, it shouldn't be this bad, right? Glancing at the half-dead priest, he sighed lightly, once again realizing he couldn't align his thought process with this guy's. Besides, even if you try to save money this way, it won't make much difference. Hearing this, Akira lifted his head from the plum soup and meat cutlet, his face expressionless. You're right. Although I'm still just a first-year student at the Shino Academy, my current assets are enough to ensure I'm well-fed and clothed for the rest of my life. Isn't it unbelievable? At my age, I've reached this point where I can eat whatever I want, buy whatever I want. If I were to die tomorrow. Aizen shook his head and sighed, then gracefully began his meal, completely ignoring the increasingly sorrowful gaze of his friend across the table. He knew very well that Akira was only pretending to be pitiful. Last night, after their conversation ended, this guy had dragged him along to sneak into the academy cafeteria. After instructing him to keep watch, he had entered a gluttonous state, his eating method too gruesome to watch. The reason this guy only took 2 rice balls and a small dish of pickled cucumbers wasn't to save money, but simply because he was too full to eat anymore. As a Shinigami with high spiritual pressure, Aizen, who was still in his growth stage, couldn't maintain his life with just a small amount of water intake like the ordinary residents of Rakongai. Moreover, due to his high spiritual power, he often needed to consume more food than the average Shinigami. Akira was a similar case. Forcing down his nausea and adhering to the principle of never wasting food, He finished the rice balls and pickled cucumbers. Then the two of them headed to today's class together. East Okongai, 64th District, Sabatsura. Violent and chaotic spiritual pressure collided furiously, an intense atmosphere permeating the air. Deafening battle cries shattered the century-long silence of this plane. Over 100 Shinigami engaged in fierce combat. Their eyes were bloodshot, filled with countless red veins, as if they had gone berserk. Though their individual strength was no more than that of ordinary squad members, the scale of their battle surpassed that of some lower-ranked officers. Keto spells exploded continuously, scorching flames burned wildly amidst the rolling dust, and piercing cries of anguish seemed particularly insignificant on this battlefield. Among the battling factions, one figure slightly shorter than the others caught the eye. The face that should have been gentle was now filled with determination, smooth black medium-length hair stained with dark red blood. Compared to his time at the Shino Academy, Sajun Kuichiki's demeanor had undergone a drastic change. He held his blade in his right hand, Keto light surging in his left, as he vigilantly watched every movement on the battlefield. However, even so, an unexpected event occurred. Young Lord Sajun! A startled cry came from behind. Sajun whirled around, instinctively swinging his Zanpakuto towards the back, but it sliced through empty air. A ferocious face appeared in his line of sight. Slash! With the sound of flesh tearing, a stabbing pain came from his chest. Sajun looked down in shock, only to find that a blade had evaded his attack and pierced straight into his heart. Whoosh! In that instant, a burst of spiritual pressure erupted, a massive pillar of dazzling light shooting straight into the sky, illuminating the heavens. The entire battlefield seemed to pause, countless gazes turning towards the direction of the light pillar. Within that intense light, a deep darkness, like viscous blood, gradually flowed out. The darkness slowly coalesced into a vague, distorted right arm, standing tall on the battlefield. Heaviness, fear, pain, the ink-black color sketched and painted across the sky until darkness covered everything. Silence became the dominant tone of the battlefield. In the next moment, an indifferent single eye slowly opened on the back of the hand. Chapter 17 The chaotic battlefield fell silent. Terrified gazes fixed on the ink-black arm standing at its center, a situation beyond comprehension. No one knew exactly what had happened, not even Sajun. He stared in bewilderment at the figure that stood like a deity, countless tiny shadows writhing across its profound form, resembling undulating black snakes. Branch-like extensions greedily absorbed the chaotically layered spiritual pressure in the air, crawling incessantly between charred and blood-soaked areas, reflecting the fearful faces of the Shinigami present. Stay calm. A furious roar from the rebel army broke the deathly silence. It's just an illusion, nothing to fear. I, Katsuya Morishita, will shatter it. Crush him, Kijomaru. The rebel leader placed his Zanpakuto horizontally before him. As his spiritual pressure exploded, a surge of white light erupted. Immediately after, countless black thorny vines shot out from the sword's hilt, enveloping the shadowy right arm at the battlefield center. Katsuya's face twisted into a vicious grin, his arrogant voice echoing across the battlefield. This is the end, monster. No one can escape Kijomaru's binding, not even a captain. Now, be a good boy and die. As he spoke, his spiritual pressure erupted. The black vines glowed with an unusual light, their countless thorns growing and contracting frantically, attempting to shred the shadowy right hand completely. Witnessing this, the rebel army once again mustered their courage. Excited expressions appeared on their blood-stained faces, their jeering voices rising in unison. That's right, just like that. As expected of Lord Katsuya, unstoppable. Kill this guy, the final victory belongs to us. Hearing these taunts, Sajun felt a twinge of panic. By now, he had recognized what the right hand standing at the battlefield center truly was. Some time ago, he had spent 1,000 at the Shino Academy to buy a protective talisman. The pattern on it was identical to that enormous shadowy right hand. To be honest, this talisman being able to block one fatal blow for him was already great value. So, even if the shadowy right hand were to be shredded directly, he wouldn't be disappointed in the least. But the scene that followed once again redefined his understanding of value for money. A teeth-grinding cracking sound emanated from the shadow. Thorns snapped one after another, signaling a shift in the battle's momentum. The tree branch-like shadows latched onto the Shinigami, absorbing the chaotic spiritual pressure in the air and instantly shattering their defenses. Suddenly, a surge of mist exploded like a tidal wave, freezing everything on the battlefield. The Shinigami's expressions and movements petrified as if someone had pressed a pause button. Bang! 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 Bursting sounds erupted from the bodies of the Shinigami entwined by the shadows, as if something was shattering within them. There was no gush of blood, no piercing screams. As the mist dissipated, 37 of them had become withered skeletons. The Shinigami on the Kuichiki side, witnessing this hellish scene, fell into a stunned daze. Everything had happened so swiftly that before they could comprehend the situation, the tide of battle had turned completely. Seeing this, the remaining rebels shuddered and, without any unified command, fled in panic. Even their leader Katsuya, with the power of a high-ranking seated officer, lay dead. Why should they stay to share his fate? Watching the rebels scatter, the Shinigami on the Kuachiki side called out to each other and eagerly began the pursuit. Sa-jun, however, stood rooted to the spot, still reeling from the shock of what had transpired. Soon, he alone remained on the vast battlefield. He walked to where the shadowy right hand had stood, finding only some pure black dust in the grass. He removed the now completely shattered protective talisman from his neck and muttered in disbelief. This goes beyond value for money. 1,000 deciding the course of a battle? There's no better deal than this. At the Shino Academy, in the Kaido Healing Arts classroom, a student stood nervously at the front of the podium. His hands glowed with a pale green light as he stared at the white mouse before him. As he injected spiritual pressure, the deep, bone-visible wound on the mouse's back healed rapidly. Countless flesh buds sprouted, expelling stagnant blood and weaving new flesh. Kaido's essence was remarkably similar to the medical ninjutsu from the neighboring village, using spiritual pressure to stimulate cells and heal wounds. A perfect demonstration. The Kaido teacher nodded with satisfaction after examining the mouse's back. Everyone, follow the process you've just witnessed. Inflict wounds of varying degrees on the white mice, then use the Kaido techniques I've taught you to treat them. Remember, the more severe the injury, the more challenging, and higher scoring, the healing. You may begin now. I'll be monitoring your technique and form throughout. Below the podium, Akira stroked his chin thoughtfully before turning to Aizen beside him. Sotsuke, I'm not great at this Kaido stuff. Any tips to improve healing efficiency? Though others saw Aizen as unremarkable, average talent, middle of the class ranking, he recognized his genius. His ability to easily achieve full marks in cultural courses was telling. No. Aizen shook his head. Kaido is essentially about fine control of one's own spiritual pressure. It requires diligent practice, there are no shortcuts. Akira sighed helplessly and turned his attention to the white mouse on the table. He picked up its slender neck with his left hand and held a scalpel in his right, pondering where to make an incision. Suddenly, a strange palpitation arose in his heart. He instinctively shuddered and, with a crack, snapped the mouse's neck. Aizen shook his head and sighed. Even in the safest Kaido class, this guy could still cause trouble. The teacher's brows furrowed as he noticed his action, quickly taking 3 steps towards him. Seeing this, Akira hurriedly placed the mouse back on the table, making a last-ditch effort. The emerald glow of Kaido burst forth, enveloping the lifeless corpse. Miraculous healing activated. In the next moment, under the teacher's astonished gaze, the broken neck realigned, and the white mouse regained its vitality. At this moment, the dead had been resurrected. Chapter 18, Hurrah Hera. Gentle as water, the Kaido teacher's face contorted with disbelief as the little white mouse leapt off the table and scurried away from the scene. He watched the mouse escape, then turned with a stiff expression to face the innocent-looking Akira. It died? Akira nodded. And came back to life? He nodded again. The teacher stood frozen, unable to accept this reality that shattered his worldview. The other academy students looked on in confusion at the two engaged in this bizarre dialogue. Focused on practicing their own Kaido techniques, they had no idea what had just transpired. Meanwhile, Aizen, who stood next to Akira, lowered his gaze, a strange light flickering in his eyes. Although he wasn't particularly interested in Kaido, his exceptional talent allowed him to easily outperform the other students and even the teacher, despite his half-hearted attitude towards learning. Death and rebirth? The essence of Kaido is to stimulate cells to achieve a healing effect. The stronger the individual, the more difficult they are to treat. By the same logic, for test subjects like these white mice, extremely weak creatures, a Shinigami with powerful spiritual pressure and profound Kaido skills could indeed bring them back to life at the moment of death. But Akira fit neither of these crucial criteria. Could it be a Kaido genius seen only once in a century? Pondering this, the corners of Aizen's mouth turned up slightly. The more he interacted with this priest, the more he sensed countless secrets hidden within him. It was like a fog so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. You never knew what scene would appear before you in the mist the next moment. You are a well of surprises, Akira. Damn it, how can such an absurd thing exist? The teacher's eyes were bloodshot as he snatched Aizen's white mouse and slammed it down in front of Akira. Kisaragi, demonstrate again. Akira blinked, his fingers flexing as he effortlessly snapped the white mouse's neck. His right hand then glowed with Kaido light, enveloping the rigid body. Because his spiritual pressure had reached the level of a seated officer, even continuous use of Kaido wouldn't cause him any strain. The teacher held his breath, eyes wide, unwilling to miss even the slightest detail. Spiritual pressure flow, deviation, errors. Standardized movements morphed, 3 fingers became 2, too far away. A perfectly good basic Kaido technique had been turned into something unrecognizable by Akira. Yet even so, the white mouse with its broken neck and lost signs of life came back to life after 3 seconds. Could it be that his Kaido is the true standard? Impossible. Unable to believe the reality before his eyes, the teacher turned and gathered all the white mice from the other students. His voice roared through the classroom, again. Crack, crack, crack. The endless sound of breaking bones, as if composing a macabre symphony, numbed the students while forcing the Kaido teacher to face reality. It was confirmed. This kid hadn't simply memorized the details and essentials of basic Kaido, from start to finish, no mistake was repeated. He'd perfected it. Just when you thought you'd seen the limit of his abilities, he'd always come up with something new. Dozens of white mice repeatedly danced on the edge of death. From initial clumsiness to later proficiency, and finally to ease and comfort, Akira's skill progressed. Watching him perform Kaido actually gave people the illusion that they could do it too. When the teacher tried to put this illusion into practice, the white mouse stopped breathing forever, without a hint of life remaining. I suddenly have something to do," he mumbled, his whole being plunged into gloom. Cradling the dead white mouse, he staggered out of the classroom. Today's Kaido lesson will end here. Watching the retreating figure in the corridor, the students turned their heads in unison to look at Akira. For a moment, they gazed at him with awe, as if beholding a divine being. That night, in the temporary male dormitory, the 2 young men sat upright, facing each other like scientists, secretly exploring the anomalous Kaido performance. Akira knew very well that this was the effect of his exclusive trait, miraculous healing. Yet its true essence remained a curiosity. How did it work? What kind of energy did it use? How did the miracle simply happen? Understanding his own cheat could also be the path to becoming stronger. If he could learn to bend the rules of the world to his advantage as his trait did, he could apply it to various other areas, such as Hado or Bakudo. This would allow him to boost effectiveness even without the corresponding traits. However, even as the 2 experimented on themselves, personally experiencing the wonder of Kaido, they still couldn't uncover the true reason behind it. In the end, Aizen could only attribute it to differences in individual talent. In this world, there would always be some strange geniuses, like him, like Akira, like Urahara of the 4th Division. 4th Division Barracks. Captain's office. Captain, that's the situation. Kawi, responsible for teaching Kaido, reported to his superior with a bitter expression, "Resurrection of the dead, it's impossible no matter how you think about it. But that kid actually did it, and with such a non-standard basic Kaido technique at that." After listening to his narrative and complaints, a strong interest flickered in Urahara's eyes. Her impression of Akira was still that of someone determined yet lecherous. Oh, and one more thing, extremely poor. The treatment fee from last time was still on credit. Who would have thought that this brat would possess such talent in Kaido? Well then, 10th seat Kawi. Urahara said softly, "I'll take the next Kaido class." Hearing this, his face immediately showed difficulty. But before he could finish speaking, an intensely cold, bone-deep killing intent suddenly enveloped him. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet below freezing in an instant. Kawi shivered, his teeth chattering as he looked with fear at the captain who wore a gentle smile. "Do you have any other opinions?" Urahara asked softly, still smiling. His head immediately shook like a rattle drum, not daring to have even the slightest other opinion. At this moment, he deeply realized how terrifying the captain was. No wonder few people dared to cause trouble in the 4th Division. In all likelihood, those who did were probably killed by her. The next morning, in the temporary dormitory. "I came specifically to thank you this time." Akira got out of bed, frowning as he looked up and down at the suddenly appearing black-haired youth. This isn't right. How come there's not even a trace? While Sajun's visit didn't surprise him, the man himself did. In Akira's experience, anyone who used a genuine Sakaon shrine talisman would retain at least some trace of the one-eyed great god's spiritual pressure. Yet Sajun showed no hint of it. He appeared unchanged, perhaps even weaker than a typical Shinigami. Uncomfortable under his scrutiny, Sajun smiled awkwardly and hastily stated the second purpose of his visit. "Actually, I wanted to ask if you have any more of those talismans from last time?" Akira's eyes lit up instantly, a grin spreading across his face. "Those talismans require a lot of my time, effort, and energy." Before Sajun could react to this statement, Akira's voice rang out, decisive and clear. "It's gonna cost extra." Chapter 19, Sorry, money can buy anything. Money is not an issue. Upon hearing these words, Sajun suddenly felt relieved. He had expected the other party to make outrageous demands, like obtaining noble privileges, entering the highest echelons of Soul Society, or becoming an officer in the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. Unexpectedly, it was just a matter of money. Akira looked at this serene piggyba man, who seemed to have money to burn and didn't care about it at all. He faintly heard the arrogant words, "Sorry, money can buy anything." For such an insufferable rich person, he must be fleeced mercilessly. 10,000, no, 100,000. Akira opened his mouth wide like a lion, instantly multiplying the previous price by 100. All right. Sajun nodded in agreement, but you must guarantee that the talismans are exactly the same as before. Also, after-sales service needs to be provided. Seeing how readily the other party agreed, Akira suddenly doubted if he had asked for too little. However, after a moment's hesitation, he didn't go back on his word. It's not every day you come across such a sucker. If he let this one get away, he'd be the one losing out. No problem. He thumped his chest loudly. For after-sales service, just come to me or go to the local shrine in the 76th district of East Rakongai, Sikaon. As for the talismans, there are only 10 left in stock. How many would you like, young Master Moan? Oh, I mean, young Master Kuachiki? Sajun looked suspiciously at the youth before him, feeling that this guy seemed to have wanted to say something very offensive just now. I'll take them all. He pondered. As for the money, I'll have my butler bring it this afternoon. Akira nodded, then flipped onto the bed. Under the astonished gazes of Sajun and Aizen, he pulled out 10 talismans from under the mattress, inside the pillowcase, from the corner of the blanket, inside his shoes, and even from Aizen's bed. Looking at his overturned mattress, Aizen's eye twitched, suddenly feeling the urge to draw his sword. Despite his vigilance and superior strength compared to Akira, he hadn't noticed the talismans hidden in his own bed. This guy is really something else. As Sajun took the crumpled talismans, considering these hiding spots, he briefly contemplated returning them. Hold on, one more question. Akira raised his right hand, index finger pointing skyward. How was the previous talisman used up? Sajun paused, pondered for a moment, then smiled. It's not really a secret. You're aware I'm the Kuachiki family heir, right? Akira nodded, his curiosity piqued. Soul Society isn't as peaceful as it seems on the surface. In its dark, neglected corners, countless conflicts and wars rage on. Sajun's expression grew serious. To gain power, both noble factions and rebel groups outside the nobility wage ruthless wars, disregarding casualties. Beyond the Imperial Guards as Shinigami, many powerful unaffiliated beings in Soul Society serve these shadow factions. To quickly boost my strength and lighten my father's burdens, I recently entered a rebel battlefield. Just as an enemy ambush nearly pierced my heart, the talisman activated. Its pattern appeared at the battlefield center, releasing a sea of mist that instantly killed 37 rebel Shinigami, including one as strong as a high-ranking seated officer. Akira stroked his chin, deep in thought. No one knew the talisman's limits better than he did. Protecting the wearer from illness and disaster might be achievable, but killing 37 Shinigami, including a seated officer? That seemed impossible. Unless... Can you describe what the dead looked like? He suddenly asked. Sajun was taken aback, then frowned as he recalled. Scarred face, average build. No, I don't mean their appearance. What did the corpses look like after death? Akira interrupted. After death? Sajun paused. Mummies. It was as if some force had drained the blood and spiritual pressure from their bodies. Hearing this, Akira finally understood what had happened. The talisman itself didn't possess such powerful abilities, but that didn't mean the one-eyed god lacked them. When it appeared on the battlefield, the cruel and bloody environment became a natural sacrificial ground. The dead became offerings, dedicating everything to Mimogai. This is really... He shook his head in amazement, a path I never imagined. Is there a problem? Sajun asked, puzzled. Not at all. Akira said decisively, there's no one more suitable for these 10 talismans than you. However, I need to clarify one point. The talismans will show different effects when triggered in different environments. Use them with caution, young man. Sajun left, confused. Despite his repeated questions, Akira didn't reveal the true meaning of his last words, only instructing him to keep one talisman for himself. Sosuke, I truly am a business genius. After seeing off the rich fool, Akira snapped his fingers proudly and boasted, let's go, our target is the academy cafeteria. Today, it's my treat. Aizen shook his head helplessly. Some people really couldn't hide their emotions. Joy, anger, sorrow, and happiness were all written on his face. But this kind of person seems quite suitable to be a friend. After breakfast, Akira and Aizen arrived at the classroom together. The first class of the day was Kaido again. Akira assumed that after a night's rest, Kawi, the teacher, would have adjusted his mindset, After all, he was an elite Shinigami, a high-ranking seated officer of the 4th Division. Placing his textbooks on the desk, he began idly looking around, waiting for the teacher's arrival. Despite his innate talent in this branch of Kaido, thanks to his exclusive trait Miraculous Healing, he still needed to learn Kaido to fully harness this ability. However, long after the bell had rung, there was still no sign of the teacher. Just as he was wondering if Kawi hadn't recovered from yesterday's shock, a familiar yet strange figure slowly walked past the window in the corridor. Akira rubbed his eyes in disbelief. When he recognized the person, his eyes widened, and he involuntarily drew in a sharp breath, muttering to himself in astonishment, could it be? Has the 4th Division's finances become so tight that they've come to the academy to collect debts? Chapter 20, I'm counting on you, Kisaragi-kun. As the figure slowly ascended to the podium, the academy students stood dumbfounded, scarcely believing their eyes. A pristine white captain's haori, 2 braids framing her face, and a beautiful, delicate visage with a gentle, approachable smile, her overall aura radiated the warmth of a spring sun. See Captain Urahara? Someone exclaimed, instantly recognizing her. As the captain of the 4th Division, Retsu Urahara had healed countless Shinigami. Her gentle smile had been repeatedly voted the most comforting in the Siriite AI communication magazine. Though the 4th Division wasn't the top choice for most academy students, it didn't diminish their admiration for her. As the object of their reverence appeared before them, the group could barely contain their excitement. In contrast, Akira buried his face behind an open book, attempting to hide from Urahara's searching gaze. His intuition screamed that this 4th Division captain was here for him. He couldn't fathom why his intuition felt so accurate this time, but he sensed her dangerous gaze had already found him. Good morning, everyone. Urahara's gentle voice resonated through the classroom, cutting through the students' awed silence. As she spoke, a hush fell over the room. I am Retsu Urahara, captain of the 4th Division of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. Your Kaido instructor, Kawi-san, is unwell. As I have some free time, I've come to give you a substitute lesson. Please don't worry, although it's been years since I last taught, I still have some expertise in Kaido. It won't hinder your learning progress. After these words, the classroom remained silent. The students exchanged bewildered glances, at a loss for words. For the captain of the 4th Division to claim some expertise in Kaido was laughable. Throughout Soul Society, who would dare assert their healing skills surpassed this brilliant woman? Seeing that the students had no objections, Urahara smiled and nodded, continuing. I heard that a Kaido genius appeared in yesterday's class. Is he here today? As soon as the words fell, Akira's heart skipped a beat. He cast a pleading look at Aizen beside him from behind his book. Their eyes met, and he could clearly read the message, I can't help you. Sosuke, you traitor, how dare you abandon me in my hour of need? Countless gazes fell precisely on Akira. The students were all too familiar with this class celebrity. Directly confronting the young lady of the Shioing family, dispatching the homeroom teacher Urui with a single strike, overwhelming the elite 6th-year student Takeo with one hand-to-hand combats technique. Consecrations, exorcisms, blessings, mansion relocations, groundbreaking ceremonies. He'd even managed to get all the male students of the Shino Academy to live in temporary dormitories woven by the 12th Division. Although he hadn't been enrolled for long, the name Akira Kisaragi was already deeply etched in their minds, impossible to forget. In the 2,000-year history of the Shino Academy, the last person as explosive as him now served as the captain of the 8th Division. Of course, that person's explosive nature was limited to his lecherous behavior. Compared to Akira's exaggerated performance, it would be hard to find another like him even in 2 millennia. When countless gazes focused on him, Akira knew he couldn't escape. He could only let out a sigh of despair as he lowered the book covering his face, his expression long. Does Captain Urahara have any instructions? Urahara's gaze fell upon him, once again examining the young man with keen interest. Although she couldn't fully gauge his abilities, Kawi's recommendation was enough to pique her curiosity. If he truly possessed once-in-a-century Kaido talent, recruiting him for the 4th Division could prove invaluable. With proper guidance, he might even become her successor as captain. For today's lesson, I need a student's assistance. She said softly, don't worry, there's no danger involved. Hearing this, Akira breathed a sigh of relief. He was glad she wasn't here to collect a debt. Having spent all his savings at breakfast, he was relying on a large sum due this afternoon. At the moment, he was flat broke. Oh, just that? You should have said so earlier. Akira relaxed, casually strolling to the podium to stand beside her. Seeing him in position, Urahara smiled and nodded before beginning the lesson. I understand you've all mastered the basics of Kaido and even attempted healing on white mice. Today, we'll focus on understanding the human body and how basic Kaido manifests in individuals with varying levels of spiritual pressure. Mastering this is crucial for passing the Kaido course. As Akira listened, an ominous feeling crept into his heart. Urahara's gentle gaze settled on him. Kisaragi-kun, please place your left hand on the experiment table. Despite her incredibly friendly smile, the moment their eyes met, Akira felt as if every pore on his body had suddenly opened, with a bone-chilling cold rushing in. His danger instinct blared a sharp warning. It was as if disobeying her request would lead to a fate worse than death. Slap. Without hesitation, Akira placed his left hand on the experiment table. Urahara smiled approvingly, then, to the shock of onlookers, extended her pristine right hand and gently covered the back of his hand. Hold on. Something seems off about this situation. Akira felt the smoothness on the back of his hand and a faint fragrance filled his nostrils, giving him a surreal sensation. But reality quickly kicked the door. When Urahara lifted her right hand, the smooth sensation was replaced by searing pain. Blood flowed, flesh tore, and a ghastly wound appeared on the back of his hand. Please observe the movement essentials and the release of spiritual pressure. For such a minor injury, basic Kaido can easily achieve complete healing. As she explained calmly, her right hand emitted an emerald green Kaido light, enveloping Akira's left hand. The wound healed rapidly before their eyes, even the blood stains vanishing completely. The crowd erupted in awe, marveling at her profound healing skills. Even with just basic Kaido, she demonstrated effects akin to reviving the dead and mending bones. These are the finer points. Urahara said gently, when attempting Kaido on the human body, the main challenge is overcoming psychological barriers. Now, Kisaragi-kun will demonstrate for everyone once more. As she spoke, to everyone's bewilderment, she picked up the scalpel on the experiment table and swiftly left the ghastly wound on the back of her own hand. Snow-white skin and flesh tore open, blood flowing incessantly. The familiar gentle smile appeared before his eyes as she softly said, I'm counting on you, Kisaragi-kun. Chapter 21 How does it feel? Gazing at the gentle and beautiful face before him, Akira's expression was somewhat dazed. Out of the blue, not only was the debt not being collected, but he was even receiving a benefit. Could this be what they call good deeds are rewarded? Kisaragi-kun, is something wrong? A knowing smile appeared on Urahara's face. She always showed unlimited tolerance towards geniuses in the field of Kaido. Compared to Bakudo, binding, and Hado, destruction, talents in healing Kido were somewhat scarce. No, not at all. Akira shook his head, then extended both hands. Captain Urahara, I'll begin now. She nodded slightly. Then, under countless envious gazes that wished they could take his place, his fingers enclosed Urahara's injured left hand. A faint emerald light arose, and the injury began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. The snow-white skin and crimson blood intertwined, reflecting a unique beauty. What he found strange was that Urahara, the formidable first Kinpachi and one of the most proficient swordswomen in Soul's society, had not a single callus on her hand. Normally, hands that have wielded sword or knife handles for years should have thick calluses at the base of the thumb, as well as various scars. But hers was completely different. Delicate and smooth, like a flawless piece of mutton fat jade. Unlike Akira's focus, her beautiful eyes were slightly furrowed, her puzzled gaze constantly lingering on that healing Kido light. Something unexpected had happened. Kawi was right, this boy was strange. Strange to the point where one couldn't understand how his Kaido was activated. His spiritual pressure was abundant, at least at the level of a high-ranking seated officer. But whether in terms of movements or the flow of spiritual pressure, there wasn't a hint of the expected standards. Full of errors, yet it produced an effect stronger than normal basic Kaido. How on earth was this possible? Urahara was lost in thought and confusion, completely overlooking her now healed hand. As well as someone's careful appraisal. Top-grade beauty, 99% pure, a rare treasure. Does it look good? Urahara asked, seeing that his hand was still holding hers. Akira nodded quite approvingly. How does it feel? Excellent. His expression suddenly froze, his neck creaking like a rusty hinge. When he raised his head, a smiling, beautiful face met his eyes. What should one do when caught red-handed touching someone's hand? He desperately wished he could ask for urgent advice online. Under her calm gaze, he smiled sheepishly and released her hand. Although she didn't say anything, he felt as if he were sweating buckets. He stood obediently to the side, awaiting judgment. Fortunately, Urahara didn't dwell on this. Instead, she turned to look at the students below the podium, continuing the day's lesson. Just as Akira was about to breathe a sigh of relief after class ended, he heard Urahara address him. Kisaragi-kun, please come over for a moment. I have something I need to ask you. His face fell, features drooping. Considering the difference in their combat abilities, he swallowed the refusal that had risen to his lips. Indeed, as he'd always suspected, gentle women are the most deadly. Walking one in front and one behind, they made their way down the corridor. Upon reaching the teacher's office, they found it empty. I initially wanted to ask you this in the classroom, but considering its potential impact on your life, I thought it best to speak privately. Urahara said with a gentle smile, seemingly unaffected by the earlier incident. Are you interested in becoming the 5th seat of the 4th division? Akira was momentarily stunned, never expecting such a question. On the way here, he'd entertained thoughts of some cliché after-school scenario with a female teacher. His hopes had been misplaced. Isn't it premature? He asked, bewildered. I've only grasped the basics of Kaido. Besides, compared to healing Kido, sword art is more my strong suit. Midway through his response, Akira suddenly caught himself. Glancing at Urahara again, he noticed the gentle captain's gaze had intensified dramatically. Did you just say you're more proficient in sword art? His mouth twitched as he suppressed the urge to speak further. He'd spoken too hastily, forgetting her true identity. Clearly, sword art intrigued this first Kenpachi far more than Kaido. Akira was acutely aware of his Kaido level. Indeed, compared to his sword art prowess, his healing Kido skills were somewhat lacking. After all, the level disparity was evident. Sword art, level 32 Kido, level 23, nearly a full tier's difference spoke volumes. Moreover, the Kido level encompassed Bakudo and Hado, which constituted a significant portion. Kaido accounted for only a fraction. Noting his silence, Urahara nodded slightly. I see. Let's set aside the matter of joining the 4th division for now. It's almost time for your next class, you should go prepare. Akira breathed a sigh of relief, bid farewell to Urahara, and turned to leave without a backward glance. Sister Hana might be attractive, but life was more precious. Being alone with this dangerous woman in a room set his nerves on edge, his danger instinct blaring sharp alarms. Thank goodness she didn't press the issue. He thought, standing in the corridor, what's the next class again? Never mind. I'll find Sosuke, he always remembers. No one was more attuned to Aizen's spiritual pressure than him. Even if Aizen deliberately concealed it, Akira could still pinpoint traces of his presence in the vast sea of people. You actually survived. Aizen remarked, somewhat surprised to see him unscathed. This guy had done something so brazen, yet here he was, without a scratch. What kind of talk is that? Akira snapped, are you that eager for me to die so you can inherit my money? Aizen sighed helplessly, massaging his forehead. Yes, this was the familiar shrine priest he knew. By the way, what's our next class? Akira asked, falling into step beside him. Kaoru-sensei's sword art class. Aizen replied calmly, we should head to the warehouse for bamboo swords. Today's lesson is likely practical combat. Hearing this, Akira's heart skipped a beat. He turned to Aizen with a blank expression and muttered, Sosuke, you don't think Kaoru-sensei will suddenly fall ill, do you? Chapter 22. Backstabbed by a good brother. Even the invincible teacher Urui had fallen. In Akira's eyes, Urui's mental fortitude was unparalleled. Despite often causing trouble and leading Class 1A to be repeatedly labeled as problematic, he would still show up at the sword art dojo rain or shine. Though his skills were somewhat lacking, his dedication surpassed that of over 90% of his colleagues. But now, Akira gazed dejectedly at the white figure at the front of the dojo, his expression a mix of bewilderment and resignation. Exactly, Race to Urahara was there, not the middle-aged teacher of them. He turned slightly toward Aizen beside him and asked in a low voice. Sosuke, do you think? Does Kaoru-sensei still have a chance of survival? Hearing this, Aizen fell into deep thought before giving his assessment. It's hard to say. Although he wasn't clear about Urahara's true identity, his instincts told him that this woman was far more complex than she appeared. When he first met her, he seemed to see mountains of corpses and seas of blood emanating from her presence. Even a genius like Aizen had to admit, so far, Retsu Urahara of the 4th Division was the strongest existence he had ever encountered, bar none. Based on this inference, if Urui insisted on not giving up this sword art class, Aizen couldn't guarantee he would come out unscathed. But what intrigued him more was what exactly Akira had said to her. However, it was obvious that she was here for him. The white figure stood at the front of the dojo, Urahara holding a bamboo sword, her gaze kindly sweeping over everyone. Whether it was an illusion or not, the moment she gripped the bamboo sword, her aura suddenly sharpened, as if emanating a crisscrossing radiance. Everyone, unfortunately, I just received news that teacher Kaoru Urui has fallen ill and been sent to the coordinated relief station. So, I will be teaching this sword art class for you all. But please don't worry, I hold a 10th dan in Kendo, which is more than enough to instruct you. Moreover, I understand from teacher Kaoru Urui that today's sword art class content is practical combat. And what I excel at is practical combat. As soon as the words fell, Her sharp gaze swept over, like two swords instantly piercing through Akira hiding in the crowd. The moment their eyes met, his danger instinct let out a shrill alarm. He instinctively gripped his bamboo sword tightly, his whole body instantly entering a combat state. The fierce aura immediately caused him to undergo a drastic change. Aizen looked at his friend beside him with surprise, finding his current appearance somewhat unfamiliar. However, Akira quickly regained his composure. After a brief shiver, he returned to his original state, as if the previous scene had been merely an illusion. "Everyone, are you ready?" Urahara asked gently. "Bring out your full strength. Now we begin the sword art practical combat. Let's start with you." The academy student sitting at the front was momentarily stunned but soon became excited. He grabbed the bamboo sword and charged forward with roar. Regardless of Urahara's actual sword art level, she was still one of the captains of the 13th Division of Imperial Guards. In the entire Syriite AI, she was considered one of the top figures. To engage in practical combat with such an existence was something academy students of many generations could only dream of. The student who stepped forward was visibly thrilled. His hands, gripping the bamboo sword, trembled slightly as blood rushed to his face, flushing his cheeks. After bowing respectfully, he swiftly stepped forward and swung his sword down at her. As an elite student of Class 1A, he did possess some skill. However, the moment Urahara's stance unfolded, the student's fate was sealed. With just 2 or 3 parries, she knocked his bamboo sword flying, and he met with defeat. "Your movements are too broad and open," Urahara commented. "You're unable to adapt quickly. During daily practice, focus on integrating basic kendo into your instincts, completing multiple technique variations in the instant of swinging your sword. Of course, at your current stage, your kendo standard is still above the passing line." The defeated student's expression, initially dejected, brightened upon hearing the latter half of her words. "Thank you, Captain Urahara." Another student stepped forward, taking his stance. Then, with one strike, he too was defeated. Urahara offered a few explanatory sentences, pointing out his shortcomings and indicating the path for his future training. The practical combat progressed swiftly. Students came forward one after another, only to have their bamboo swords knocked flying within 2 or 3 moves. Under Urahara's guidance, everyone's understanding of kendo, and consequently sword art, improved significantly. Akira looked sorrowfully at his classmates around him, suddenly realizing that this group of elite academy students seemed to have all become fans of Sister Hana. "Sosuke, you're the only comrade left in my camp." Aizen brushed Akira's hand from his shoulder with slight disdain. He picked up the bamboo sword beside him and stood up, saying without looking back, "No, we were never in the same camp." Betrayed by his friend once again, Akira's demeanor instantly became more desolate. As he grappled with his emotions, Aizen had already positioned himself before Urahara. She observed the brown-haired youth with a contemplative gaze. She recalled this young man, Sosuke Aizen. He had accompanied Akira to the coordinated relief station when the latter needed treatment for his arm. The two young men seemed to share a close friendship. "Captain Urahara, please guide me." Aizen bowed slightly, then gripped the bamboo sword with both hands, assuming a standard starting stance. Urahara raised her bamboo sword and nodded solemnly. "Let's begin." The moment she finished speaking, Aizen exploded into action with astonishing speed. He moved like an arrow released from a bow, radiating an aura of sheer intensity. Urahara's eyes gleamed with interest, like a hunter who had found worthy prey. Her bamboo sword moved in a flurry, filling the air with its presence. In an instant, the atmosphere crackled with tension, and a powerful aura permeated the room. Unlike the previous bouts with the academy students, this clash between Aizen and Urahara felt like a real battle. His bamboo sword slashed fiercely, but she sidestepped with grace. She countered with a powerful strike, knocking his weapon from his hands. The match was over. The academy students stared at the two figures standing at the front, stunned by a sudden realization. It seemed Akira's unassuming companion was also an undeniable genius. Impressive kendo skills. Urahara praised. Indeed, geniuses tend to attract one another. After lowering her sword, she and Aizen suddenly looked at the last person who would go through the practical combat. "Kisaragi-kun, I hope your performance won't disappoint me." Watching the two smiling figures before him, Akira felt a chill run down his spine. In that moment, he sensed a multitude of malicious intentions converging upon him. He mused bitterly, so, betrayal by a close friend truly is the most painful, isn't it? Chapter 23 The correct way to use the crazy first Kenpachi. Sister Hana. "Sosuke, you'll never inherit my legacy." Akira advanced with his sword, his face filled with indignation. He suddenly realized why Aizen had changed his usually low-key style. So this is what he was waiting for. A mutual appreciation between geniuses? No, this guy just wanted to trap him. Feeling the puzzled gazes surrounding him, Aizen sighed helplessly. His previous actions seemed to have backfired. To test this guy's true abilities, he had essentially sacrificed himself. Yet he couldn't suppress his curiosity. As his only friend at the Shino Academy, little priest, let me see your true limits. Standing opposite Urahara, Akira's face drooped, and he said pitifully in a small voice, Captain Urahara, I was just running my mouth earlier. I actually don't know anything about sword art. She responded with a smile, it's alright, true sword art doesn't lie in a fight. As the words fell, Akira saw Urahara change from holding the sword with one hand to gripping it with both. The previously gentle aura instantly vanished, replaced by a sharpness that cut to the bone. Her gentle smile slowly faded, her eyes widened slightly, her warm face now as cold as an azure. A grand killing intent spilled out from beneath her robes. As if endless darkness spread from beneath her feet, the dojo transformed into hell, a bone-chilling cold devouring everything, and a terrifying pressure covered the area before her. The moment their calm gazes met, Akira's danger instinct issued an unprecedented warning, a sharp ringing seeming to snap his nerves. In his eyes, the bamboo sword that originally posed no threat was now inexplicably covered in mottled, sticky blood. Drip, drip, drip. Urahara's lips curled in a smile, but it no longer held her usual gentle approachability. Instead, it was filled with an intense killing intent. Without hesitation, the moment Akira gripped his bamboo sword, she took the initiative to attack. Her toes lightly touched the ground, and her whole body became like an arrow released from a bow, charging straight ahead. The bamboo sword whistled through the air. The air let out a groan of unbearable burden, as if it had been split apart, with the airflow separating to both sides. Without using even a bit of spiritual pressure, relying solely on her understanding of sword art and rich combat experience, Urahara unleashed an astonishing sword technique at this moment. In an instant, the bamboo sword was at close range. Akira's pupils constricted sharply, his mind blank. His danger instinct erupted like a volcano, causing him to unconsciously unleash his strongest power. The bamboo swords clashed with a crisp sound. As they crossed paths, Urahara's footsteps faltered. Her nimble toes spun on the dojo floor. In the moment of turning, using the momentum, she pressed all her strength onto the bamboo sword, slashing diagonally downward. She controlled her power to be almost on par with Akira's. Otherwise, she would have overwhelmed him instantly in their first clash. Even so, his performance surprised her. It was a power unlike anything expected at this stage. Even without using spiritual pressure, the young man's sword technique conveyed great power and weight, as if wielding a stone pillar rather than a bamboo sword. Akira's pupils remained constricted. Having barely weathered the first strike, the second sword technique followed immediately, leaving no time to breathe. The flat bamboo sword, in his eyes, became a sharp nail thrusting directly at his throat. He instinctively held his breath, tilting his neck back. The bamboo sword grazed his skin. As he narrowly avoided this technique, Akira realized he couldn't measure himself against the other academy students. To do so would be disastrous. After just this brief exchange, the watching academy students were dumbfounded. Their limited experience left them unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before them. Not long ago, the duel between Aizen and Urahara had already exceeded these elite students' understanding. Now, the clash between Akira and Urahara was even more breathtaking. Urahara had abandoned her instructional stance. The trajectory of her bamboo sword was now fierce and ruthless. One misstep could prove fatal, even with a practice weapon. Strong interest gleamed in Aizen's eyes. So, this is your true level? Spiritual pressure, Kido, sword art, hand-to-hand combats, communication with Sunpacto, talismans. Akira, how many more secrets are you hiding? At this moment, his curiosity piqued. The sword duel continued. Urahara gave Akira no time to rest, her toes barely touching the ground as she went for the kill. This time, she changed her method of attack. As she approached, the nimble bamboo sword suddenly slowed. With the sound of the first collision, the rhythm of sword dart spread out. Like a heavy, ancient melody, the alternation of low and loud notes created a deep, clear texture that spread throughout the dojo. The heavy tones intertwined with the omnipresent killing intent, spreading like a mist. Just as Akira had finally become accustomed to Urahara's attack rhythm, the bamboo sword's blade suddenly changed. The melody abruptly became extremely high-pitched and fierce. The sound of the bamboo sword strikes transformed into an unending wave of rainstorm, impacting the eardrums of the watching academy students. At this stage, Akira felt the pressure increase exponentially. Each time he received her sword technique, it made his arms tremble and his palms go numb. Fortunately, the heart of a god was constantly at work. Although he couldn't fully learn her sword techniques and style, he could absorb bits of knowledge from it. He was like a dry sponge, eagerly absorbing the sword knowledge that Urahara was carefully imparting. Sword art, level 32, 43, 47, 52, 56. His sword dart level was rising rapidly, and Urahara noticed this too. From initially barely being able to defend, to later flowing like water, Akira's swordsmanship jumped from above average to top tier. Sword art, level 60. In just a few short minutes, his sword dart level had crossed several major stages, reaching a level that even seated officers and vice captains would find hard to attain. When their bamboo swords crossed, it presented a scene of equal match. The corners of Urahara's mouth slightly raised as she realized the young man before her was a true, unparalleled genius in sword art. Thinking of this, that heart which had long been dormant suddenly blazed with fire once again. Chapter 24. Gentle women are the most fickle. As the passionate duel reaches its climax, the sharp melody of clashing swords fills the air. Akira's sword dart has reached a new level, his sword techniques now exquisite beyond compare. Even the elite academy students watching can't follow his lightning-fast movements. The bamboo swords clash, like invisible hands weaving a tapestry of broken notes, building to a crescendo. Akira switched to a one-handed grip, his body bending forward to dodge Urahara's downward strike. His head tilts back, his gaze eerily calm. Suddenly, a thunderous roar erupts. His right arm twisted, and an insane scene unfolds before the spectator's eyes. He abandons defense for all-out offense. While others might still be struggling to survive against Urahara, Akira has transcended their limitations. Sharp tones burst from his bamboo sword. His offensive becomes a relentless downpour, an unbroken screen of attacks enveloping Urahara's white-clad figure. A frenzied melody explodes skyward as bamboo fibers scatter throughout the dojo. Urahara shifted to defense, nimbly blocking the onslaught. Yet, her eyes betray a hint of passion as she regards the young man. How long has it been? 3 centuries, perhaps 5. Soul Society hasn't seen a genius like Akira in ages. Another thunderous roar. Akira's all-out swing collides with Urahara's sword, creating a deafening crash. The impact tears apart the floor, invisible ripples spreading throughout the dojo. Floorboards shaked violently as if caught in a vicious storm, peeling away layer by layer like dry twigs. As the dust settles, the academy students' faces showed only bewilderment and incomprehension. The arena is a wreck, wood chips and dust covered the fractured floor. Scattered bamboo fibers adding a unique touch to the devastation. Akira stared at the shattered bamboo sword in his hand, lost in thought. Is it over? When he raised his head, a hint of daze appeared in his expression. Initially, Urahara's overwhelming pressure made him think he might die in this sword duel. However, by tapping into his ultimate trait, the heart of a god, Akira gradually absorbed many of her sword techniques and styles, knowledge he couldn't normally access. As he internalized this learned wisdom, his understanding of sword art began to progress by leaps and bounds. Noticing this, Urahara slowly lowered her bamboo sword. Compared to him, who still struggled to control his own power, she seemed much more at ease. Although her bamboo sword bore many marks, it remained largely intact and fit for another battle. In contrast, Akira's had exploded, leaving only the handle. After a brief silence, Urahara sighed with a tinge of regret. We should have used Zanpakuto. Hearing this, Akira instinctively looked towards her. Did this woman really want to kill him? The duel with bamboo swords had already been fierce. If they had used Zanpakuto, he might have immediately joined the previous head priest of the Sakaon shrine. Observing Urahara's slightly flushed cheeks, Akira let out a long sigh, his face nearly spelling out dejected. This woman was still too dangerous. He had been considering learning sword art under her guidance. After all, Urui no longer had anything to teach him. Even after this improvement, Akira could probably defeat him in just 2 or 3 strikes. Upon reflection, it seemed only Urahara was suitable to be his sword art teacher. But every time he recalled their recent duel, a subconscious fear gripped him. It was only because she hadn't gotten carried away. If she became too excited, his small frame might be cut down on the spot. Kisaragi-kun, you've proven what you said before. Urahara said, her cheeks still flushed from excitement, her familiar gentle smile reappearing. In Kaido, you're an undoubted genius, but your sword art skills are even more outstanding. Although it might be presumptuous, please consider joining the 4th Division as your first choice after graduation. With your talent, even succeeding my position isn't out of the question. As her words fell, a series of sharp inhales echoed through the dojo, as if trying to turn the area into a vacuum. Never before had an academy student, prior to graduation, received such high praise from a captain, let alone from Captain Urahara, the most popular among the Shinigami. Yet Akira Kisaragi, the shrine priest, the honorable helper of female students, the troublemaker among troublemakers in his class, had actually done it. But when Akira himself heard these words, he didn't show the joy they expected. Instead, he bristled like a startled hedgehog. Ha, fickle woman. He thought. She had just expressed concern about negatively influencing him, preferring to extend the invitation privately. Yet in the blink of an eye, she'd changed her tune. Now his name would likely sweep through the entire Shino Academy once again. Sigh, I'll think about it. Akira muttered. Truth be told, the 4th division wasn't his first choice. But out of respect for her, he couldn't bring himself to refuse outright. Hearing this answer, Urahara showed no disappointment. She simply smiled and nodded gently. She turned around, hands folded in front of her, and bowed slightly to the surprised academy students. In a soft voice, she said, "Everyone, today's sword art class ends here. Regarding the advice I've given, please don't slack off in your daily practice. Also, if any of you are interested in Kaido, the 4th division would be very welcoming." As she finished speaking, her gaze swept the room, lingering deliberately on Akira for a moment before she smiled gently and turned to leave the dojo. Just as she stepped out the door, a familiar voice once again sounded in his ears. Retsu Urahara's trust level has reached the threshold. Check-in condition achieved. Character check-in, Retsu Urahara, Chapter 25, How dare you falsely accuse me of wrongdoing. Character check-in, Retsu Urahara, obtained sword art level +3, sword art level increased. Currently at level 63, obtained spiritual pressure level +3, spiritual pressure level increased. Currently at level 49, obtained exclusive trait, Merciful Deathblade, seeking life in death, finding a sliver of mercy within the deadly sword. Sword art speed and power both increase by 100%. Hidden effect? Akira's expression was slightly twisted, a mix of exaggeration masking undisguisable joy. His previously aching arms and body had miraculously recovered. What he had thought was a pointless beating turned out to be an unexpected boon. Urahara's trust level had reached the threshold, completing the character check-in. The increase in spiritual pressure and sword art was merely a bonus. After all, with his current talent, it wouldn't take long to reach those levels anyway. But the exclusive trait was different. Until now, he had completed countless check-ins, daily, monthly, yearly, location, character, all accumulating to only 6 traits. Yet, each one's effect was enough to cause a leap in his strength. Even the somewhat inadequate miraculous healing had brought Urahara to her trust threshold, thus granting him the merciful Deathblade trait. The boost in sword art speed and power alone made the beating worthwhile. This round, a massive profit. The only downside was the trait's mention of an unknown hidden effect. At this stage, its true nature remained a mystery. As the morning sword art class ended, Akira welcomed the long-awaited Kuachiki family butler, a young man named Jinjiro. He brought the 1 million that Sajun had promised. Observing the miserly-looking youth before him, Jin furrowed his brows deeply, increasingly feeling that his young master Sajun lacked business acumen. Though this amount meant little to the Kuachiki family, their wealth wasn't infinite. Giving it to someone like this seemed no different from throwing it away. Jin shook his head and sighed, feeling a sense of misplaced trust. Fortunately, Akira remained oblivious to Jin's thoughts. Otherwise, he might have demonstrated the true meaning of a merciful Deathblade. Sir Kisaragi, the money and accounts are now settled. Jin collected himself, perfectly concealing his emotions. As a Kuachiki vassal, he'd learned not to question his master's affairs, even when they seemed utterly unreasonable. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. He stood to depart but was suddenly pushed back down. Not so fast. Akira leaned in close, his expression serious. Rich folks like Mr. So, no, I mean loaded toffs, no, that's not right either. Wealthy young masters, that's better. They're a rare breed. Regarding the talisman, please remind him not to rely on it too much when you return. The only one who can truly protect oneself is oneself. Hearing the first half of his statement, Jin's gaze held a hint of displeasure. What kind of talk was this? Insulting the master in front of his lackey? But upon hearing the latter half, his mood eased slightly. This miserly youth, though lacking in virtues, at least possessed a shred of conscience. I understand. Jin replied with a slight bow. I will report these words verbatim to young Master Sajun. After seeing him off, Akira wordlessly dragged along Aizen, who had been training intensely nearby, and left the temporary dormitory. Teacher's office. Oikaru, eyeing the stack of high-value banknotes before the smug Akira, suddenly broke into a cold sweat. After a moment's hesitation, he leaned in and whispered, Akira, I know that although you're often mischievous, you're not bad at heart. While nothing has happened yet, you should escape early. I'm acquainted with Jidenbu Kanzaka, who guards the Hikadoman, so use a mission proof to reach the White Road Gate, then escape to West Rakongai. Even the 13th Division of Imperial Guards won't bother. Bang. Akira slammed the table, cutting off Uruoi mid-sentence. Uruoi-sensei, how dare you falsely accuse me? This money is clean, that sucker Kuachiki Sajun. Uruoi's eyes widened in disbelief, his parched lips quivering as he croaked, You robbed young Master Sajun? Aizen watched this theatrical scene unfold, shaking his head helplessly. He couldn't fathom Akira's ways. He was like a contagious virus. Spend too much time with him, and your thinking inevitably warps to match his. Their teacher Uruoi was a prime example. What are you on about? Akira snapped, that sucker couldn't scrape together 10,000. The Kuachiki family's butler, Jinjiro, brought this. Then you kidnapped young Master So. No. Akira roared, it was a business deal, all legitimate. People always seem to misjudge him. Uruoi looked doubtful. Knowing Akira, this money shouldn't have come easily. But faced with such vehement insistence, he couldn't press further. As long as his student hadn't committed any grave offense, he'd be lenient. If you've done no wrong, that's good. He sighed, relieved, your debt to Shino Academy is settled. Now, since you're here, I have news about upcoming course changes. Akira's face creased in confusion. Remember what I told you before? Uruoi sipped water to wet his throat before continuing. With Headmaster Junshiro Okikiba away on a mission, the Captain Commander is acting head of Shino Academy. His Excellency has noted the widening gap between elite and ordinary students, so he's implementing a new teaching method. Conventional lessons no longer benefit geniuses like you. It's time for real combat experience. His expression turned grave, his tone uncharacteristically serious. In East Rakongai's 32nd district, there's been a horrific civilian massacre. Your mission, investigate, then capture or kill the culprit. You'll act as true Shinigami, in the name of Academy students. Chapter 26, The moment of composure breaks East Rakongai, 32nd district. Neat, flat houses lined both sides of the road, with occasional undulations. As one of the front districts of Rakongai, the civilians here boasted ruddy complexions and strong bodies. Though simple, their clothes were clean and proper. Compared to the districts further back, these people lived quite comfortably. However, fear etched the faces of passers-by. They hurried along with hunched shoulders and bent bodies, frequently glancing behind him and into blind spots. The slightest rustle startled them, unconsciously quickening their pace. An unusual sight graced the civilian residential area of the 32nd district, two young men in blue and white Shino Academy uniforms strolling down the street. The Rishi density in the air is normal. Aizen remarked, his gaze calm and hands hanging at his sides. His voice remained nonchalant, as if describing the most ordinary thing. The lingering smell of blood persists. The death toll should be between 12 and 14. The chaotic scene on the street neither affected his thinking nor caused any misjudgment. Upon arriving at the location Uruoi provided, he immediately assessed the situation. The buildings are intact, with no signs of intense fighting. He observed, his expression impassive as he peered through windows at the murder scenes within, analyzing from this point, the culprit's strength. What are you doing? He broke off abruptly. Aizen, usually as calm as still water, instantly lost his composure when he noticed his companion's behavior. Akira, who accompanied him, had somehow donned shrine priest attire. Predominantly white, with black accents forming the emblem of the one-eyed great god on the collar and hem, it looked both eerie and sacred. The only flaw was that this outfit hung a bit loose, slightly hindering movement. Of course, what caused Aizen's emotional fluctuation wasn't the wardrobe change at a murder scene. It was that Akira had somehow procured a wooden table and set up incense and teacups. A ritual, of course. Akira glanced sideways at him, bewildered that such an intelligent person could ask such an obvious question. Wasn't his intention clear? Aizen felt his temples throb. Of course he knew this was a ritual. After spending so much time with this priest, how could he not understand the process? What baffled him was the madness of performing a ritual at a murder scene. Could it really communicate with the dead and identify the culprit? The Saga-owned shrine is unique. Akira said with a smile, unlike other shrines, even those of the Eyes family, our deity, the one-eyed great god, actually exists. As we say locally, those who dedicate everything but their eyes to him receive protection. Just like now. Under Aizen's astonished gaze, he snapped his fingers. Instantly, the water in the teacup began to tremble. Ripples spread in slow circles, finally reflecting face after face. They've appeared. Akira smiled, today's unjustly dead. Aizen frowned, his confusion deepening. He'd always believed that beings who died in Soul Society were broken down into basic rishi. The Shino Academy textbooks even stated that death was merely a cycle. People from the living world die and are reborn in Soul Society. The same applies to beings in Soul Society, their rishi transforms into Kishi, reborn in the living world. But what was this scene before him? Were the deceased, broken down into rishi, being reborn? Countless questions swirled in his mind. As Aizen tried to resolve one with his knowledge, more would surface. While he pondered, Akira had already dipped his finger into the teacup. His expression slightly serious, he occasionally muttered, "I see, is that so? What a pity," as if genuinely conversing with the deceased. Aizen watched in amazement, gaining a new understanding of his troublesome friend. When Akira withdrew his finger, he looked at Aizen with a grave expression. "The culprit has been identified. We're probably no match for him. Let's report to Kaoru-sensei first. After he informs the 13th Division of Imperial Guards, we'll leave it to the Shinigami to handle." Aizen's pupils showed a barely noticeable fluctuation as he nodded slightly. As they began cleaning up the altar table, preparing to leave, the Rishi density in the air suddenly shifted. A heavy spiritual pressure descended, and a desperate aura erupted from behind the houses. "Leaving?" A hoarse, overlapping voice echoed in the empty street as a figure slowly emerged from one of the houses. Black Shyakusho, average build, an ugly face crisscrossed with scars, and a zanpakuto slung at the waist. These details revealed the person's identity. A rogue Shinigami. Two brats who haven't even graduated from the Shino Academy. The scarred face sneered, "Since you've discovered my secret, you might as well die." However, what surprised him was that when the two young men saw him, not only did they show no panic, but one of them even wore a playful smile. Just like a hunter who had caught his prey. "I once heard a theory that perpetrators of atrocities often return to the scene of the crime to admire their handiwork," Akira said with a smile, "and you've just helped me confirm this theory." The scarred face's expression froze as he immediately realized he had been tricked by the young man before him. The revival of the dead, the identity of the culprit, it was all a lie. He had been hiding in the house earlier, clearly hearing the conversation between the two, thinking it was some new investigation method. But it turned out to be a complete deception. In an instant, he became furious with embarrassment and roared, "Humphrey! Don't think about escaping, go accompany those fools in death." Hearing this, Akira raised an eyebrow, asking in surprise, "Escape? Why should we escape?" As soon as these words were spoken, the scarred face's heart skipped a beat. Boom! Violent spiritual pressure was unleashed recklessly. Tangible light exploded from Akira's body, resonating with the Rishi in the air and transforming into surging currents. The spiritual pressure, too powerful to comprehend, made the scarred face's pupils contract, instantly suffocating him. His face flushed with blood. "Let's try this," Akira said, a sudden idea striking him as he raised his right hand in a shooting pose. Hado number 4, Byakurai, Pale Lightning. As if countless birds were emitting piercing cries, dazzling white light exploded from his fingertip, transforming into a brilliant lightning bolt that traversed the empty street. The next moment, the black figure in front was pierced through the heart, his skipped heartbeat never to recover. Aizen wasn't very interested in such an overwhelming battle. The culprit was merely an ordinary Shinigami, after all. He looked with some curiosity at Akira, who was posing like a gunslinger. "Earlier, when you obtained information from the deceased, were you just tricking the culprit or could you really do it?" Hearing this, Akira turned his head, the corners of his mouth slightly raised in a meaningful smile. "You guess." Chapter 27, Death Comes Knocking. "I'm not guessing. Say it or don't." Aizen's face remained expressionless, showing no interest in playing word games. Although Akira hadn't answered directly, based on his understanding of this guy, he was probably capable of doing it. Gathering the Rishi of the deceased, making them reappear in this world, and then engaging in conversation, was this the power of Mimagi? Or was it related to this priest? Countless thoughts swirled in Aizen's mind until his attention was once again drawn by someone. "Hey, you don't think dying settles the score, do you?" Under his astonished gaze, Akira moved the red offering table directly in front of the Shinigami's corpse. Incense was lit, a bell gently rung, and a teacup filled with clear water. "In the name of Shrine Priest, Akira, I offer this tribute to the one-eyed great god, Mimagi." His fingers fluttered like butterflies, forming one strange yet sacred hand seal after another. As he chanted, he visualized the object of worship in his mind. Aizen calmly observed, trying to understand this unique method of worship in his own way. He released his spiritual pressure, covering the entire area. At this moment, his Reikaku, spiritual sense, was amplified to the extreme, capturing any possible changes in the air. Rishi flowed like water, like a gentle breeze, like moonlight. Wait. His eyes widened slightly as he noticed something unusual. As the ritual progressed, it seemed as if an invisible force was freezing the decomposed Rishi of the deceased in its current state, finally gathering it in the clear water of the teacup. He tried to trace the source of this power. As he followed the faint fluctuations to their origin, he was shocked to discover that with his current Reikaku, he couldn't trace it to its end. The power was like a silk thread, continuous and unending, stretching far to the east. Aizen narrowed his eyes slightly, looking in the direction where the power disappeared, and had a rough idea in his mind. Sikaon District, Mimagi Shrine. While he was trying to trace the source, Akira had already dealt with the rishi of the rogue Shinigami. A face filled with terror and disbelief appeared on the surface of the teacup, frantically moving about like a headless fly, trying to escape this cage-like constraint. However, no matter how it tried, it couldn't escape. "I'm curious, what was your motive for committing such a serious crime?" Akira dipped his finger into the teacup. In no time at all, his brow furrowed, then furrowed deeper, until his eyebrows almost joined together. "It's utterly heartless." He casually shattered the cup, dispersing the gathered rishi within and completely ending the scarred face's life force. He killed an entire family over a verbal argument. Aizen's eyebrows raised slightly, but he showed no surprise. In his understanding, this world was rife with evil deeds. Such actions weren't uncommon in Soul Society's records. When people possess power that doesn't match their mental fortitude, their mentality often undergoes subtle changes. Good or evil, it's just a matter of a single thought. "Well, we've clarified the motive and brought the culprit to justice." Akira clapped his hands and began tidying up his tools. From the incense to the bell, these were all rewards from daily check-ins. Though not particularly useful, they were high quality compared to similar market products. Notably, these rewards could be stored in the system's exclusive space. Of course, this was limited to inanimate objects. The wild rabbit he'd drawn a few days ago couldn't be stored, so he had to slaughter it and tearfully eat several large bowls of rice with it. Aizen was accustomed to Akira's actions by now. Putting incense and bells into his pocket without any visible bulge was child's play. He'd even seen Akira pull out a brand new bed from his crotch before. Though he couldn't fathom how he managed it, Aizen had resolved never to casually touch his things. Who knew where this lunatic might have put them before? After retrieving the scarred face's Zanpakuto, they cleaned up the scene and prepared to retrace their steps. This mission wasn't particularly challenging. Even other elite academy students could have completed it, albeit with more difficulty. The gap between ordinary Shinigami division members and elite academy students wasn't vast. Of course, compared to Akira and Aizen, the difference was quite stark. Ordinary Shinigami couldn't withstand even a burst of their spiritual pressure. "Sosuke, let's go," Akira urged, glancing at Aizen, who was still observing the surroundings. "Time waits for no one. If we hurry back, we can still catch dinner at the academy cafeteria. Tonight, they're serving special tofu dishes." Aizen glanced sideways at him, said nothing, and turned to follow. This guy couldn't remember his class schedule or theoretical knowledge, but he had the academy cafeteria's weekly menu memorized crystal clear. Perhaps this was the true meaning of talent. "I'm not sure if it's just my imagination," Aizen mused as they walked side by side down the empty street, "but this mission doesn't seem as straightforward as it appears." Akira waved his hand, slapping his shoulder. "The Rakongai isn't full of intrigue. Commoner deaths are commonplace here. Only the first 10 districts offer any semblance of stability." At this, his lips curled into a slight smile, "and that's what the commoners aspire to most." Aizen nodded, understanding. Like Akira, he had grown up in the Rakongai and knew its rules well. Compared to the nobles' quarters, the outer districts of Rakongai were practically hell. As the two figures vanished at the street's end, a faint glow materialized on the empty ground. Where there should have been nothing, a blurry, hazy scene appeared. It was as if a layer of white mosaic had been painted over the scene. The pair moved at a brisk pace, even faster than when they had arrived. Aizen was puzzled but assumed his companion was simply eager to return for a meal. Upon leaving the 32nd district, Akira suddenly slowed. He clenched his fists, glancing apprehensively at Aizen. "You must have noticed it too, right? The abnormality in the rishi?" Aizen furrowed his brow, perplexed by his unfamiliar expression. Akira shook his head, looking back toward the 32nd district. He muttered, "No. It's the scent of death." Chapter 28, The Human-Shaped Minesweeper. From the moment he stepped into the 32nd district, his danger instinct began frantically warning him, with endless malice emanating from all directions. It felt as if the next step would plunge him into the abyss of death. Unlike the sword duel with Urahara, whose danger stemmed from pure killing intent, an instinctive desire for battle, the danger in this district was more like a mixture of malice, killing intent, and a disregard for life. Although they couldn't detect the specific location of the other's spiritual pressure, Akira was certain that the source of the malice might be quietly observing them from some hidden corner. Therefore, he dared not make any unusual movements. Everything proceeded as usual. It wasn't until they safely left the 32nd district that the danger instinct's warning finally subsided, and his tense nerves gradually relaxed. The scent of death. Aizen furrowed his brow slightly, trying hard to recall all the abnormalities in the district. He was aware of Akira's inexplicable intuition, so he didn't doubt the truthfulness of these words. But no matter how he tried to remember, he couldn't find any clues. Well, no need to worry too much about it. Akira laughed carelessly. Let Kaoru-sensei and the others deal with the headache when the time comes. We just need to hand over the murderer's Zanpakuto, make an honest report, and then this matter will have nothing to do with us. Plus, we can get a nice reward. Tonight's tofu dishes are on me. Aizen nodded imperceptibly. Although what Akira said made sense, for some reason, he had an uncomfortable feeling ever since hearing those words earlier. With his current level of spiritual pressure, for someone to avoid detection and not be discovered by him, they would have to be at least at a captain's level, right? Did this incident actually involve someone at the captain level? What role did that rogue Shinigami play in all of this? And what was the truth behind everything? Aizen lowered his eyelids slightly, and in his deliberately concealed pupils, a flame of curiosity burned fiercely. Shino Academy. Teacher's office. Urui stared at the distinctive Zanpakuto on the desk, lost in thought. How long has it been? In less than a day, they had investigated the incident and executed the culprit. This kid's strength now rivals that of a high-ranking seated officer, doesn't it? With this in mind, he narrowed his eyes and began to size up Akira, who was lounging in another teacher's chair. Unfathomable. Utterly unfathomable now. This is your well-deserved reward. Urui efficiently placed a stack of bills on the desk. Regarding the intelligence you mentioned about potential greater danger in the 32nd district of East Rakongai, I'll report it truthfully to the Captain Commander. What happens after this is no longer your concern. Akira casually pocketed the money and left, dragging along the pensive Aizen. However, just before exiting, Aizen halted and turned back to say gravely, if possible, try to have a captain investigate this matter. Urui's expression froze, confusion flickering across his face, but upon seeing his serious gaze, he couldn't help but nod. Although he didn't know much about this student, Sosuke Aizen, the mere fact that he could keep up with Akira spoke volumes about his abilities. I should report to the Captain Commander immediately. Urui snatched up the Zanpakuto from the desk and hurriedly left the office. Night fell. Akira got his wish and savored the special tofu dishes at the academy cafeteria. Though Aizen seemed somewhat distracted during the meal, he still ate heartily. Tofu was one of his favorite ingredients. Its fragrant aroma, silky texture, and subtle flavor made it nearly impossible to ruin, even for a mediocre chef. Fortunately, the academy's culinary staff were far from mediocre. After dinner, the pair returned to their temporary dormitory right on schedule. The reconstruction of the Shino men's dormitory was ongoing, so they were housed in a temporary structure built by the 12th Division's research group. To their credit, the quality of this makeshift dormitory was quite impressive. Its only drawback was its somewhat cramped quarters. For Akira and Aizen, sharing a 4-person room, this wasn't much of an issue. Other temporary dorms housed 4 students, with one unfortunate unit crammed with 6 occupants. Belly full of food and coffee, life is good. Akira declared, sprawled on his bed like a contented fish, his face the picture of satisfaction. Compared to his previous life of hardship in the Sakaon district, this was practically paradise. Of course, he mused, resting his head on Nanao's lap would make it even better. He reminisced about his time at the shrine, when after a hearty meal, he'd recline on her lap, relishing a massage from her deft fingers. The strength, touch, and technique had been unparalleled. Aizen glanced at the lounging Akira, then returned to his own bed, immediately diving into his spiritual pressure training. Great curiosity, he believed, was fueled by formidable strength. No matter one's innate talent, without diligent practice, one would inevitably blend into mediocrity. Though uncertain of Akira's exact potential, he had observed his recent performances with interest. If he maintained this trajectory, he might one day surpass Aizen himself. This thought kindled a peculiar sense of urgency in his heart. Everyone's studying, so I should too. Akira sighed, sitting up straight. The downside of befriending someone like Aizen was this: when he studied and trained, goofing off alone brought a crushing sense of guilt. Such guilt made it impossible to eat or sleep well, a form of mental torture. Fortunately, Akira consoled himself, his own talent wasn't shabby. While he couldn't boast a photographic memory, he did possess a keen intuition. He straightened his posture, ready to join in the studying. Rishi affinity maxed out, let's see your limit. As he fully released his spiritual pressure, the long-awaited unexpected event unfolded. The Rishi in the air began to flow in irregular patterns, gradually converging. A faint white glow emerged in the dormitory, illuminating the colorful fabrics above, below, and around. Aizen slowly opened his eyes and sighed helplessly. He knew this incident wasn't as simple as it appeared. This shrine priest was like a human-shaped minesweeper. Wherever he went, unexpected situations were bound to occur. Akira, too, noticed the anomaly. As he clearly saw the changes in the dormitory, his eyes widened. The white light was blurry and hazy. As Rishi gathered, it gradually became clearer, revealing a pure white, simple figure. What is this? A pixelation came to life? Chapter 29, a request from Kenpachi Soya. Pure white hair draped over a black shayakusho. Long ebony hair tied back in a ponytail, with two strands hanging down like catfish whiskers. His slightly pale face betrayed no emotion. His pitch-black eyes radiated an endless depth, as if nothing in this world held his interest. This was Akira's first impression of the pixelated figure that suddenly materialized in their dormitory. Although he didn't recognize the person before him, he could discern the man's identity from his distinctive attire. On the back of the hori, the number 11 was embroidered in an elaborate style. The captain of the 11th Division, the 8th Kenpachi, Soya Ashiro. Among this year's students at the Shino Academy, you two are considered to have exceptional qualities. The man before him spoke calmly, as if stating a mere fact: leave the academy as soon as possible. Staying here will only waste your talents. If you want to become true Shinigami, fulfill your duty, kill all the hollows in this world. Hearing this, Akira scratched his head in confusion, but I never said I wanted to become a Shinigami. Although he wasn't quite sure why this captain of the 11th Division had appeared here, when Soya materialized, the sense of danger Akira had felt earlier in the 32nd district resurged. He deduced that the man before him had a significant connection to the massacre in the Rakongai. Consequently, his first impression of this 8th Kenpachi wasn't favorable. It was even worse than when he first met Aizen. Soya paused, the words on the tip of his tongue suddenly difficult to express. It was his first time encountering a student who didn't aspire to become a Shinigami. What's so great about being a Shinigami? Akira sneered. You have to obey your superiors, be responsible for your subordinates, and sometimes even be commanded by incompetent, simple-minded individuals who are just occupying a position. Unless you get to be a captain, then it might be okay. After this speech, Soya fell silent. So it wasn't that Akira wasn't interested in being a Shinigami, but that he wasn't interested in being an ordinary division member. Beside him, Aizen's eyes gleamed with a faint light, a subtle spiritual pressure fluctuating around his body, appearing rather eerie. The moment Soya appeared, he had already entered a battle-ready state. Akira, though unclear about this guy's intentions, surmised from his manner of appearance that it probably wasn't anything good. After all, a Shinigami captain wouldn't be sneaking into the men's dormitory at night without reason. However, just as he was about to make a move, a calm voice suddenly rang out. Put away your spiritual pressure, Sosuke Aizen. Soya, with his back to him, said coolly, I admit you have talent, but you haven't reached your limit yet. With your current abilities, you can't stop me from doing anything. Aizen's heart sank immediately, his brows furrowing. This man seemed to know him far too well. So, Captain Ashiro, you sneaked into the men's dormitory just to tell us about a Shinigami's duties? Akira asked with confusion, if that's all. No. Soya cut him off decisively, worried about another derailment of the conversation. Everyone has different ideas, and I have no right to interfere with others' life paths. I came because I have a request. Upon hearing this, both Akira and Aizen's faces filled with bewilderment. A captain, coming to ask a favor from a student? Moreover, regarding this matter, his gaze turned ice cold, and the temperature in the dormitory plummeted. Even the active Rishi, spirit particles, in the air grew still. I hope you two can keep it a secret for me. At this moment, Akira's danger instinct pierced through his mind like a high note that could obliterate the entire world. Of course we can. He answered without hesitation, choosing life over breaking the law. Aizen's brows furrowed deeper as he struggled to comprehend the situation. When he was about to speak, he caught Akira's frantic eye signals. After careful consideration, he chose to remain silent. Because based on his understanding of this guy, if there was even the slightest possibility of resistance, this guy would have directly given Soya a flying midfinger to the face. Such compliant behavior spoke volumes. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave. From start to finish, Soya's emotions barely fluctuated, like a precision instrument. Only when speaking with Akira did his expression show the slightest change. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the morning. He said finally, I'll be waiting for you at the north gate of the Shino Academy. Of course, Akira may come alone if he wishes. As the words faded, the white figure began to blur. The Rishi disintegrated from his body, and his spiritual pressure vanished from the spot. With his departure, the dormant Rishi stirred back to life. The temperature slowly began to rise. Akira and Aizen looked at each other, feeling powerless for the first time. What are you planning to do? Aizen broke the silence, his voice deep. Akira moved his legs, which had gone numb from the pressure. Through gritted teeth, he said, what choice do I have? This old guy kills without blinking. If I don't go, I'm dead. By the way, I'm going alone. Confusion immediately spread across Aizen's face. Akira grinned frankly, I don't know what he wants me to do, but if I can't accomplish it, I might not return. If you come along, you'd just be another soul under his blade. Then neither your ideals nor mine would be realized. Aizen fell silent before asking slowly, "Don't you fear death?" "What kind of nonsense is that?" Akira looked at him as if he were an idiot. "Do I look like someone who isn't afraid of death? If I had a choice, it wouldn't be me lying here, but that old guy with the catfish whiskers. Don't talk nonsense. If I don't come back, remember to take care of the Sakaon shrine for me." "Alright, good night, Sosuke." As the words fell, the dormitory returned to silence once again. Soon, the rhythmic sound of soft breathing filled the air as Akira drifted into dreamland. Against the wall, Aizen stood bathed in moonlight streaming through the window, his face bearing an expression of deep contemplation. Chapter 30, Silence was the wisest choice the next day. Everything seemed normal. From Aizen's perspective, Akira hadn't changed at all, still carefree enough to steal his grilled fish without a care in the world. Today's lesson was Kido, Akira's greatest weakness. During class, he showed unusual focus, carefully noting every key point the teacher mentioned. He might have even taken notes. If he'd had a pen. This was typical of him, being atypical in the most typical way. Despite Aizen's careful observation, he couldn't detect any concern in Akira about the previous night's events. The Hado number 4, Byakurai, and the Hado number 11, Lightning Bind, utilize different spiritual pressure operation methods and have distinct release forms. However, their power levels are quite similar when using the same amount of spiritual pressure. As the Kido instructor for Class 1, he ranked among the elite Shinigami. Akira studied the teacher on the platform, a man with a stern face and muscular build who looked more suited to berserking than spellcasting. The future captain of the Kido Corps, Tessai Tsukubishi. Notably, Tessai was the only teacher who could physically overpower Akira. Tsukubishi-sensei, looking at the sequence numbers, there are less than 300 types of Kido. If all these Kido were deciphered by the enemy, would we be helpless? The curious student's question made Tessai pause before breaking into hearty laughter. Haha, every class asks something similar. But once they dive deeper into Kido studies, they realize that mastering all spells is practically impossible. Of course, throughout Soul Society's long history, we've had our share of so-called geniuses. These geniuses who mastered all Kido went on to create their own spells based on the existing ones. Since the sequence numbers were already taken, their new spells weren't included in our textbooks. If you're curious, visit the library in your free time. For now, focus on your core studies. His expression turned serious, his pectoral muscles twitching noticeably. Otherwise, don't expect any mercy during exams. Truth be told, his intimidating presence overshadowed Kido itself. You know what they say. A mage needs to bulk up and master combat skills, skull smashing, hit blocking, head chopping, just add a light spell for flair, and you're set. After the Kido class, Akira couldn't agree more. Sosuke, what do you think? Aizen sighed helplessly, whatever makes you happy. Having faced similar questions from him before, Aizen was nearly immune now. Trying to engage in serious discussion was pointless. Within moments, this guy would drag you down to his level of thinking and then somehow make you feel inferior with his wealth of experience. So silence was the wisest choice. That night was dark and windy. A young figure leaned against the wall, scanning the area. Finding no patrolling Shinigami nearby, he leaped over the high wall of the Shino Academy in a single bound. Just as he was feeling smug about his stealth, the door beside him slowly opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. The door wasn't locked. Aizen said expressionlessly. Akira's eyes widened in surprise, "Weren't you not coming?" "Who said that?" "Yeah, I forgot that part." Akira came to his senses, realizing Aizen had never actually told he won't come. "You're too weak." Aizen said calmly, "If Soya Ashiro were to make a move, you wouldn't even have a chance to escape. But with me here, it's different." Hearing this, Akira perked up. "You mean, you can beat him?" Aizen stared at the young man in front of him as if looking at an idiot. "I can make our deaths a bit more dignified." In the silence, a white light like a mosaic wavered in the empty space. As Rishi gathered in abundance, a white figure materialized clearly. Soya's utterly expressionless face appeared before the two once again. Noticing that Akira and Aizen had arrived together as promised, he showed a hint of surprise. After a moment of silence, the corner of his mouth curved into a barely perceptible arc. "Since you're both here, follow me." "Where to?" "The central great underground prison." Hearing this, Akira and Aizen exchanged glances, both seeing confusion in each other's eyes. But as Soya's figure grew more distant, the two felt it unwise to discuss the matter and followed with heavy steps. A massive pit dominated the vast area, its interior lined with sturdy stone slabs stained with fresh, dark red marks. The place seemed abandoned, no Shinigami guards patrolled nearby, and the sealed iron gate had rusted from disuse. In a blur of motion too quick for Akira to follow, Soya twisted the iron gate like a pretzel and tossed it aside as if it were nothing. As they approached the deep pit, a nauseating stench grew stronger, reminiscent of a hell filled with corpses. Death's presence weighed on Akira's heart like invisible hands squeezing tight. Despite his familiarity with the horrors of the Sakaon district, the oppressive atmosphere here made him deeply uneasy. When they reached the pit's edge, they saw blue stone slabs stained black-red with mottled blood stains. The acrid smell assaulted their senses, telling visitors all they needed to know about this execution ground's brutality. 100 years ago, the Ashiro family met with misfortune. Soya narrated dispassionately, as if recounting someone else's story. Other nobles, coveting our wealth, framed and killed most of our family. They threw the survivors into this pit, the central great underground prison. Here, we were forced to fight against hollows used for executions. Those who survived would be cast into the Angai, parsing world, without a Jigakucho, hell butterfly, to guide them. The nobles who had framed the Ashiro family watched from above, reveling in the condemned suffering below. My sister and I were the last ones thrown into this execution ground. Only now did Soya's voice betray the slightest emotion. To protect me, my sister attempted the Hado number 73, clashing of twin lotus blue fire. A spell beyond her capabilities. It cost her life. He turned to face the silent Akira and whispered, if possible. I want to see my sister one more time.